Good evening, and welcome back to Histo Hispa. Tonight, we journey deep into the rainforests of Central America, to a civilization that built towering pyramids beneath a canopy of green. To the Maya, one of the most sophisticated and enigmatic cultures of the ancient world. For thousands of years, the Maya flourished in what is now Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. They created magnificent cities with towering temples that pierced the jungle canopy. They developed a complex writing system, one of the few fully developed scripts in the ancient Americas. They were master astronomers, tracking the movements of planets and stars with remarkable precision. They created a calendar so accurate it rivaled anything in the old world. And then, mysteriously, their great cities were abandoned, swallowed by the jungle. Tonight, we will explore the rise and fall of Maya civilization. We will walk through the ruins of Tikal and Palenque, Chichen Itza and Copan. We will decipher their mysterious glyphs and understand their sacred calendar. We will meet their kings and priests, their farmers and artisans. We will witness their achievements in mathematics, astronomy, art, and architecture. And we will seek to understand the mystery of their decline. Close your eyes and let your mind drift back across the centuries. To a time when jungle cities bustled with life, when priests climbed steep pyramids to commune with the gods. To a world of jade and obsidian, of chocolate and maize, of jaguars and serpents. To the Maya civilization, take a deep breath, let the present world fade away, and join me as we explore the mysteries of the jungle. To understand the Maya, we must first understand the land they inhabited. The Maya world encompasses a vast region of Central America, covering approximately 125,000 square miles. This region is divided into three main areas, each with distinct geography and climate. The northern lowlands, covering the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. The southern lowlands, including the Piton region of Guatemala and parts of Belize. And the highlands, the mountainous regions of southern Guatemala and Chiapas, Mexico. Let us explore each of these regions. The Yucatan Peninsula is a vast, flat limestone shelf, jutting into the Caribbean Sea and the Gulf of Mexico. The landscape is characterized by thin soils and porous bedrock. Rain quickly percolates through the limestone, leaving the surface dry for much of the year. There are no rivers on the surface of the Yucatan. Instead, water collects in underground caverns and pools called cenotes, natural sinkholes formed when the limestone roof collapses. These cenotes were vital to Maya civilization in the Yucatan, providing the only reliable source of water. Towns and cities were built near cenotes, and these sacred pools became places of ritual and sacrifice. The sacred cenote at Chichen Itza, for example, was a site where precious objects, and sometimes people, were offered to the gods. The vegetation of the Yucatan is low scrub forest and dry tropical forest. It is hot and humid, with a distinct dry season from November to May and a wet season from June to October. The southern lowlands present a different landscape. This region is covered in dense tropical rainforest, one of the most biodiverse ecosystems on Earth. Towering mahogany and ceiba trees create a thick canopy, beneath which grows a tangle of vines, ferns, and palms. The forest teems with life howler monkeys, jaguars, tapirs, colorful parrots and toucans, poisonous snakes and insects. The southern lowlands receive abundant rainfall, sometimes over 100 inches a year. Rivers wind through the forest, providing transportation routes and fertile floodplains. But the rainforest soil, though lush, is surprisingly poor. The nutrients are locked in the vegetation, not the soil. When trees are cut and burned, the ash fertilizes the ground temporarily, but the nutrients quickly wash away in the heavy rains. This meant that Maya farmers had to be innovative, developing techniques like raised fields and terracing to maintain soil fertility. The southern lowlands, despite their challenges, were the heartland of classic Maya civilization. Here, great cities like Tikal, Calakmul, Palenque, and Copan rose and flourished. Finally, the highlands. This region is dramatically different: volcanic mountains rising over 12,000 feet, steep valleys, cool temperatures, and pine forests at higher elevations. The highland Maya lived in a land of contrasts, with fertile volcanic soils and abundant rainfall, but also rugged terrain that made transportation and communication difficult. The highlands were rich in resources: obsidian, the volcanic glass used for cutting tools and weapons, jade, the precious green stone prized above all others, and cacao, the source of chocolate, which grew in the warm lowland valleys. The Maya world, then, was diverse arid plains, dense jungles, and towering mountains. This diversity shaped Maya culture, creating regional differences in language, architecture, and customs. Yet despite these differences, the Maya were united by a shared worldview, a common writing system, and extensive trade networks that linked cities across the entire region. The environment also profoundly influenced Maya religion and cosmology. The Maya saw the natural world as alive with spirits and divine forces. The ceiba tree, with its massive trunk and towering height, was the sacred world tree, connecting the underworld, the earth, and the heavens. The jaguar, the apex predator of the jungle, was associated with kingship, war, and the night sun journeying through the underworld. The serpent, especially the feathered serpent, was a symbol of transformation, rebirth, and divine power. Mountains were seen as sacred places where the earth touched the sky, and many Maya pyramids were designed to resemble mountains, symbolic links between the human and divine realms. Caves were entrances to Xibalba, the underworld, places of darkness and danger, but also sources of water and fertility. Rain was life itself in a land where droughts could devastate crops and bring famine. The rain god, known as Chak in the Yucatan, and by other names elsewhere, was one of the most important deities. Rituals to ensure rain, including offerings and sometimes human sacrifice, were central to Maya religion. The agricultural cycle shaped the Maya calendar and ritual life. Maize, the staple crop, was not just food but a sacred gift from the gods. According to Maya creation myths, humans were made from maize dough, molded by the gods after earlier failed attempts with mud and wood. Maize was cultivated through a technique called milpa, or slash and burn agriculture. Farmers would clear a plot of forest, burn the vegetation, and plant crops in the ash-enriched soil. For 2 or 3 years, the field would produce well. Then it would be left to regenerate for several years while the farmer moved to a new plot. This method, still used by some Maya communities today, requires large areas of land and works well with low population densities. But as Maya cities grew, the pressure on the land increased, leading to innovations like terracing, raised fields in swampy areas, and intensive garden cultivation. The Maya also cultivated beans, squash, chili peppers, tomatoes, avocados, and many other crops. They raised turkeys and dogs for food, and kept bees for honey. They hunted deer, peccary, and other game, and fished in rivers and along the coasts. Cacao, the source of chocolate, was grown in the lowlands and was so valuable it was used as currency. Cacao beans could buy goods in the marketplace, and the rich drank a bitter, frothy chocolate beverage, often flavored with chili peppers, vanilla, or honey. The environment provided other resources essential to Maya civilization. Limestone was abundant and easily worked, perfect for building temples, palaces, and monuments. The Maya became master stonemasons, carving intricate sculptures and hieroglyphic texts into limestone stelae and building facades. Wood from the rainforest was used for roof beams, lintels, and carved lintels that adorned doorways. Cotton was grown and woven into cloth. Dyes from plants, minerals, and insects colored the textiles in brilliant reds, blues, yellows, and purples. Maya blue, a vibrant turquoise pigment, was created through a unique process combining indigo dye with a special clay, producing a color that has lasted for over 1,000 years. Salt was harvested along the coasts, essential for preserving food and for trade. Trade routes crisscrossed the Maya world, connecting coastal communities with highland cities and lowland centers. Merchants traveled by foot along forest paths, by canoe along rivers and coasts, carrying goods to distant markets. Obsidian from the Guatemalan highlands reached cities hundreds of miles away. Jade from the Motagua River Valley was carved into jewelry and ritual objects. Feathers from tropical birds, especially the resplendent quetzal, adorned the headdresses of kings and nobles. Shells from the Caribbean and Pacific coasts were crafted into ornaments and musical instruments. This trade not only provided material goods but also spread ideas, art styles, and political influence. Maya cities were interconnected in a vast network of exchange, competition, and cooperation. Now let us turn to the origins of Maya civilization. Who were the Maya, and where did they come from? The Maya are part of the larger Mesoamerican cultural tradition, which includes the Olmec, the Zapotec, the people of Teotihuacan, and the Aztecs, among others. Mesoamerica, the region from central Mexico to Honduras, shared certain cultural traits: the cultivation of maize, the use of a 260-day ritual calendar, a ball game played with a rubber ball, pyramid building, human sacrifice, and a pantheon of gods including feathered serpents and rain deities. But within this shared framework, the Maya developed a distinct civilization with unique achievements. The Maya people belong to a linguistic family distinct from other Mesoamerican groups. Today, there are over 30 Maya languages spoken by approximately 7 million people in Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. These languages are divided into several branches, including Yucatec, Quiche, Mam, and many others, each with its own dialects. The linguistic diversity suggests that the Maya have inhabited the region for thousands of years, with different groups diverging over time. Archaeological evidence indicates that people have lived in the Maya region for at least 12,000 years, since the end of the last ice age. These early inhabitants were hunter-gatherers, living in small bands, moving with the seasons. Around 3000 BCE, during the Archaic period, people in Mesoamerica began to cultivate crops, most importantly maize. The domestication of maize, from a wild grass called teosint, was one of the most important developments in human history. Maize became the foundation of Mesoamerican civilization, allowing populations to grow and settle in permanent villages. By 2000 BCE, villages appeared across the Maya region. People lived in simple thatched houses, made pottery, and cultivated maize, beans, and squash. These early farmers are the ancestors of the Maya. The pre-classic period, from around 2000 BCE to 250 CE, saw the gradual development of Maya civilization. The roots of Maya civilization stretch deep into the past, to a time before pyramids and palaces, before kings and glyphic writing. Let us explore the preclassic period, the long era when the foundations of Maya culture were laid. The early preclassic, from around 2000 to 1000 BCE, was a time of villages and simple farming communities. People lived in small settlements, perhaps 20 to 100 individuals, in houses made of wood posts, thatch roofs, and walls of wattle and daub, woven sticks covered with mud plaster. These houses were cool in the heat, easy to repair, and similar to the traditional homes still built by Maya people today. Life revolved around the agricultural cycle. Men cleared the forest and planted crops. Women ground maize on stone metates, shaping the dough into tortillas, the round flatbreads that were the staple of the diet. Children helped with chores, fetching water, tending gardens, and learning the skills they would need as adults. The Maya of this period were part of a broader Mesoamerican world. To the west, in the Olmec heartland along the Gulf Coast of Mexico, a sophisticated culture was emerging, building massive stone heads, ceremonial centers, and developing early forms of writing and the calendar. The Olmec influenced neighboring cultures, including the Maya, through trade and possibly through the spread of religious ideas and artistic styles. Some scholars believe that the Olmec were the mother culture of Mesoamerica, though this idea is debated. What is clear is that by the Middle Preclassic period, from 1000 to 400 BCE, Maya culture was becoming more complex. Villages grew larger, and some developed into towns. Social stratification emerged, with elite families distinguished from commoners by their wealth, their access to exotic goods, and their ability to mobilize labor for public projects. At Naxibi, in the Piton region, archaeologists have uncovered platforms and pyramids dating to the Middle Preclassic. These structures, though modest by later standards, required the organized labor of hundreds of people. The construction of public architecture suggests that leaders had emerged who could command the labor and loyalty of the community. These leaders were likely both political and religious figures, intermediaries between the people and the gods. Ritual and religion were central to Maya life from the earliest times. The Maya believed in a universe filled with gods and spirits, forces that controlled the weather, the fertility of the land, and the fate of individuals. To ensure the favor of these deities, rituals were performed, offerings of food, incense, and sometimes blood. Bloodletting, the ritual piercing of one's own flesh to offer blood to the gods, was a practice that would become central to Maya religion. Kings and nobles would pierce their tongues, ears, or genitals with stingray spines or obsidian blades, collecting the blood on bark paper, which was then burned, the smoke rising to the heavens as an offering. This practice may seem shocking, but to the Maya, blood was the most precious offering, the essence of life itself. The late pre-classic period, from 400 BCE to 250 CE, witnessed the emergence of true cities and the full development of Maya civilization. This was a time of explosive growth, monumental construction, and the flourishing of art and culture. El Mirador, mentioned earlier, became the largest city in the Maya world. Located in the remote jungles of northern Guatemala, El Mirador was a metropolis, with pyramids, palaces, causeways connecting different parts of the city, and a population that may have reached 100,000 at its peak. The pyramids of El Mirador are breathtaking in scale. The Danta complex, a series of platforms and pyramids built on a natural hill, rises over 230 feet above the jungle floor. The volume of stone and fill used to construct the Danta complex is greater than that of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The facades of these pyramids were decorated with enormous stucco masks, depicting gods and supernatural beings. These masks, painted in vivid reds, blues, and greens, must have been awe-inspiring to those who approached the city. Building such structures required not only laborers but also engineers, architects, and artists. It required a complex society with a strong central authority, capable of organizing and feeding thousands of workers. It suggests that the rulers of El Mirador were powerful kings, seen as semi-divine figures who mediated between the human and supernatural worlds. Other late pre-classic cities included Calakmul, Tikal, and Uaxactun in the southern lowlands, and Civil and Saros in other regions. These cities were connected by trade routes and shared a common culture, but they were also rivals, competing for resources, prestige, and power. Warfare, which would become a defining feature of classic Maya civilization, was already part of life in the late pre-classic. Defensive walls, fortifications, and depictions of captives and warriors in art suggest that conflict was common. The late pre-classic also saw the development of the Maya writing system. The earliest known Maya glyphs date to around 300 BCE, found on pottery and stone monuments. These early texts are difficult to decipher, and the full hieroglyphic system would not emerge until the Classic period, but they demonstrate that the Maya were developing a way to record language, history, and ritual. Maya writing is a logosyllabic system, meaning it uses both logogram symbols representing whole words and syllabic signs symbols representing sounds. It is one of the most complex and sophisticated writing systems ever developed, and for many years it was considered undeciphered. The breakthrough came in the mid-20th century, when scholars like Yuri Norazov, Tatyana Proskoryakov, and Linda Scheel made critical advances in understanding how the script worked. Today, most Maya glyphs can be read, revealing a wealth of information about history, politics, religion, and daily life. The late pre-classic Maya also developed the long count calendar, a system for tracking time from a mythological starting point. The long count allowed the Maya to record dates with precision, and it reflects their sophisticated understanding of astronomy and mathematics. The Maya calendar is actually a set of interlocking cycles. The Hab is a 365-day solar calendar, divided into 18 months of 20 days each, plus a short month of 5 unlucky days. The Tzolk'in is a 260-day ritual calendar, perhaps based on the human gestation period, or the agricultural cycle. The Hab and Tzolk'in mesh together like gears, creating a cycle of 52 years called the calendar round. The long count, however, is linear, counting the number of days from a mythological creation date, which in our calendar corresponds to August 11, 3114 BCE. Long count dates are written in 5 units kin days, Uinal 20 days, Tun 360 days, Katun 7,200 days, roughly 20 years, and Baktun 144,000 days, roughly 400 years. This system allowed the Maya to record dates thousands of years into the past and future, and it reflects their concern with time, history, and cosmic cycles. But the prosperity of the late preclassic did not last. Around 100 to 200 CE, many late preclassic cities, including El Mirador, entered a period of decline. Populations decreased, monumental construction ceased, and some cities were abandoned. This collapse, sometimes called the preclassic collapse, is not fully understood. Several factors may have contributed. Environmental degradation is one possibility. The construction of massive cities in the rainforest required extensive deforestation. Trees were cut for building materials, for fuel to make lime plaster, and to clear land for agriculture. Deforestation can lead to soil erosion, decreased rainfall, and the disruption of local ecosystems. Studies of lake sediments and pollen records suggest that the Maya region experienced significant environmental stress during this period. Drought may also have played a role. Climate studies indicate that the late preclassic and the transition to the classic period coincided with periods of reduced rainfall. In a civilization dependent on rain-fed agriculture, droughts could cause crop failures, famine, and social unrest. Warfare is another factor. Competition between cities may have escalated into destructive conflicts, diverting resources from agriculture and construction to military endeavors. Overpopulation relative to the carrying capacity of the land may have led to shortages and competition for resources. Whatever the causes, the preclassic collapse marked a turning point, but it was not the end of Maya civilization, only a transformation. As some cities declined, others rose to take their place. Tikal, which had been a relatively minor center in the late preclassic, grew in power and influence. New dynasties emerged, claiming legitimacy through connections to earlier rulers or through divine sanction. The classic period, beginning around 250 CE, would see the Maya reach new heights of achievement. But the lessons of the preclassic, the cycles of growth and collapse, would echo throughout Maya history. The classic period, from approximately 250 to 900 CE, is the era most people think of when they imagine the ancient Maya. This was the age of mighty kings, towering pyramids, intricate hieroglyphic inscriptions, and sophisticated art. Let us explore the classic Maya world, a world of competing city-states, each with its own ruler, its own history, and its own ambitions. The Maya world of the classic period was not a unified empire like Rome or China. Instead, it was a mosaic of independent city-states, each controlling a territory that might include the main city, satellite towns, and rural villages. The largest city-states, like Tikal, Calakmul, Palanque, and Copan, had populations in the tens of thousands and controlled territories hundreds of square miles in extent. Smaller polities might have only a few thousand inhabitants and limited territory. These city-states were constantly interacting, trading, forming alliances, engaging in warfare, and competing for prestige and power. Political relationships were fluid, with alliances shifting and hierarchies changing over time. The political structure of Maya city-states was hierarchical. At the top was the Keu-hul Ajah, the divine lord or holy king. The king was seen as a semi-divine figure, the intermediary between the human world and the gods. His legitimacy depended on his royal bloodline, his ability to perform rituals that ensured the prosperity of the realm, and his success in warfare and diplomacy. Maya kingship was usually hereditary, passing from father to son, though there were exceptions. In some cases, women ruled as queens, either in their own right or as regents for young sons. One of the most famous Maya rulers was Lady Kayabel, who ruled the city of El Peru Waka in the 7th century as Kalumt, or Supreme Warrior, a title usually reserved for men. Below the king were the nobles, the aristocratic class who controlled land, held administrative positions, and commanded military forces. Nobles were distinguished by their elaborate clothing, jewelry, and access to luxury goods. They lived in large stone palaces, often near the center of the city, and their lives were filled with ritual, courtly activities, and political intrigue. Below the nobles were the commoners, the vast majority of the population. Commoners were farmers, artisans, traders, and laborers. They lived in simple houses on the outskirts of cities or in rural villages. They owed tribute to the king in the form of labor, agricultural produce, or goods, and they could be called upon to serve in the army. At the bottom of the social hierarchy were slaves, usually captives taken in war, though people could also be enslaved for debt or crime. Slaves performed menial labor, and they had few rights. But slavery among the Maya was not necessarily permanent. Slaves could sometimes buy their freedom or be freed by their owners. The center of a Maya city was a complex of monumental architecture: pyramids, temples, palaces, ball courts, and plazas. These structures were built of limestone blocks, covered with stucco plaster, and painted in bright colors: red, blue, green, yellow. The pyramids served as platforms for temples, where priests performed rituals to honor the gods and ancestors. Steep staircases led to the summit, where the temple stood, often adorned with elaborate roof combs, vertical stone extensions decorated with carvings and stucco. The ascent of the pyramid was a symbolic journey from the earthly realm to the heavens. Palaces were multi-room structures where the king and his family lived, where courtly business was conducted, and where nobles gathered for feasts and ceremonies. Palaces often had throne rooms, private quarters, and courtyards. The walls were sometimes decorated with murals depicting historical events, mythological scenes, or courtly life. Ball courts were found in almost every Maya city. The Maya ball game, played with a heavy rubber ball, was both a sport and a ritual. The game had deep symbolic meaning, representing the cosmic struggle between the forces of life and death, light and darkness. The rules of the game are not entirely clear, but players use their hips, elbows, and knees to keep the ball in play, trying to pass it through stone rings set high on the walls of the court. The game was dangerous, and injuries were common. In some cases, the game ended with the sacrifice of one or more players, usually the losers, though some scholars suggest the winners may have been sacrificed as an honor. Plazas were open spaces where public ceremonies, markets, and gatherings took place. They were often paved with stucco and surrounded by important buildings. During festivals and rituals, the plazas filled with people, the air thick with incense, the sound of drums, flutes, and conch shell trumpets echoing off the stone walls. One of the most important structures in a Maya city was the stela, a tall stone monument carved with hieroglyphic texts and images. Stelae recorded the deeds of kings, their births, accessions to the throne, military victories, alliances, and ritual performances. They were erected at regular intervals, often at the end of a katun, a period of roughly 20 years in the Maya calendar. Stelae served to commemorate the king's achievements and to legitimize his rule by demonstrating his piety, his power, and his connection to the divine. The texts on stelae have allowed scholars to reconstruct the history of Maya city-states, identifying dynasties, tracking political events, and understanding the relationships between different cities. Tikal, one of the greatest classic Maya cities, provides a vivid example of the classic Maya world. Located in the rainforest of northern Guatemala, Tikal was inhabited from the pre-classic period, but it reached its peak during the classic period. At its height, Tikal may have had a population of over 100,000 people, making it one of the largest cities in the Maya world. The city's central ceremonial precinct was dominated by massive pyramids. Temple I, also known as the Temple of the Great Jaguar, rises over 150 feet above the plaza. It was built as a funerary monument for the King Jasa Chan Kawil, who ruled in the late 7th and early 8th centuries. Temple II, slightly smaller, faces Temple I across the plaza and is believed to be a monument to Jasa's wife, Lady 12 Macaw. Temple IV, the tallest structure at Tikal, reaches over 210 feet, making it one of the tallest pre-Columbian structures in the Americas. Climbing to the top, one can see the canopy of the rainforest stretching to the horizon, with the tops of other pyramids poking above the trees. Tikal's history is one of rivalry, warfare, and resilience. In the 4th century, Tikal established itself as a major power, forming alliances and expanding its influence. But in 378 CE, the city suffered a devastating defeat when warriors from Teotihuacan, a massive city in central Mexico, intervened in Maya politics, possibly at the invitation of a rival Maya city. Tikal's king was killed, and the city fell under the influence of foreign powers. For over a century, Tikal's power waned, and few monuments were erected. But in the 6th century, a new dynasty emerged, and Tikal began to rebuild its strength. Under rulers like Jasa Chan Kawale and his successors, Tikal waged successful wars against its rivals, most notably Calakmul, another great Maya city to the north. These conflicts, recorded in hieroglyphic texts, reveal a world of shifting alliances, surprise attacks, and ritualized warfare. Maya warfare was both practical and symbolic. Battles were fought to capture territory, control trade routes, and extract tribute, but warfare also had deep ritual significance. Capturing enemy warriors, especially nobles and kings, was a primary goal. Captives were brought back to the victor's city, where they were humiliated, tortured, and often sacrificed in public ceremonies. The sacrifice of a captured king was the ultimate demonstration of power and divine favor. War imagery is pervasive in Maya art. Warriors in elaborate feather headdresses and jade jewelry, wielding obsidian-tipped spears, and atlatl spear throwers, their faces painted, their bodies adorned with symbols of power. The Maya did not have metal weapons. They fought with weapons of stone and wood, but these were deadly in the hands of trained warriors. Despite the violence, Maya civilization during the Classic period was also a time of remarkable cultural achievement. Art flourished, with sculptors creating masterpieces in stone, stucco, wood, and jade. Maya sculptors had an extraordinary ability to render the human form, capturing the subtleties of facial expressions, the folds of cloth, the posture of the body. Pottery was another art form at which the Maya excelled. Maya potters created vessels in a variety of shapes: plates, bowls, vases, incense burners. Many were painted with intricate scenes, gods and mythological beings, courtly scenes, historical events. Some of the finest Maya pottery comes from the region around the Usumacinta River, and these vessels are prized by museums and collectors today. The scenes on pottery provide a wealth of information about Maya life, dress, ritual, and mythology. They also include hieroglyphic texts, often recording the name of the vessel's owner or describing the scene depicted. Let us now explore several of the great classic Maya cities, each with its own character, its own architectural style, and its own history. We will visit Palenque, nestled in the foothills of the Chiapas highlands. We will walk through Copan, the city of sculptors and astronomers. We will stand before Chichen Itza, the later city that blends Maya and foreign influences, and we will contemplate Calakmul, the great rival of Tikal. Palenque, located in the modern Mexican state of Chiapas, is one of the most beautiful and well-preserved Maya cities. Unlike the massive pyramids of Tikal, Palenque's structures are smaller but exquisitely detailed. The city sits on a series of terraces carved from the hillside, with the jungle rising behind, and the coastal plain stretching before it. Palenque flourished during the 7th century, under the rule of Kenish Janob Pakal, known as Pakal the Great. Pakal ascended to the throne at the age of 12, and ruled for 68 years, one of the longest reigns in Maya history. Under Pakal, Palenque became a center of art, architecture, and learning. The Temple of the Inscriptions, Pakal's funerary monument, is one of the most famous structures in the Maya world. The temple sits atop a 9-level pyramid, representing the 9 levels of the underworld. Inside the pyramid, a hidden staircase descends into the heart of the structure, leading to a burial chamber. In 1952, Mexican archaeologist Alberto Ruz Lawillier discovered the tomb, one of the most significant archaeological finds in the Americas. Inside, he found Pakal's sarcophagus, a massive stone coffin covered with an intricately carved lid. The lid depicts Pakal at the moment of death, falling into the jaws of the underworld, but also being reborn as the maize god, emerging from the earth. The sarcophagus was surrounded by offerings, jade jewelry, pottery, stucco heads, and the bones of sacrificed individuals, likely retainers who accompanied the king into the afterlife. The walls of the tomb were inscribed with hieroglyphic texts, recounting Pakal's genealogy and his journey to the underworld. Palenque's architecture is characterized by elegance and refinement. The palace, a complex of courtyards, rooms, and galleries, was the residence of Pakal and his successors. The palace features a unique four-story tower, possibly used for astronomical observations or as a watchtower. The walls of the palace are adorned with stucco reliefs depicting gods, ancestors, and courtly scenes. The Cross Group, a set of 3 temples built by Pakal's son, Kayenish-Khan Balam II, celebrates the accession of the new king and the continuity of the dynasty. Each temple contains a sanctuary, with a carved stone panel depicting mythological and historical scenes, linking the present rulers to the gods and ancestors. Palank's hieroglyphic texts are among the longest and most detailed in the Maya world. They provide a wealth of information about the city's history, its rulers, and its political relationships. The Tablet of the 96 Glyphs, for example, recounts the dynastic history of Palank, tracing the lineage of its kings back to mythological times. Copan, located in the western highlands of Honduras, is another jewel of classic Maya civilization. Copan was a center of art and learning, renowned for its sculptors and astronomers. The city reached its peak during the 8th century, under the rule of kings like Uexaclajun Yuba Kayawil, also known as 18 Rabbit. 18 Rabbit was a prolific builder and patron of the arts. During his reign, Copan's sculptors created some of the finest stelae and altars in the Maya world. The stelae of Copan are remarkable for their depth of carving, with figures that appear almost three-dimensional, emerging from the stone. 18 Rabbit's own stelae portray him in elaborate costumes, embodying various gods and displaying the symbols of his power. But 18 Rabbit's reign ended tragically. In 738 CE, he was captured by the king of Quirigua, a smaller city that had been a vassal of Copan. 18 Rabbit was sacrificed, a humiliating defeat that shook Copan's power and prestige. The city recovered under later rulers, but it never regained its former dominance. One of Copan's most famous features is the hieroglyphic stairway, the longest known hieroglyphic text in the Maya world. The stairway has 63 steps, each carved with glyphs, recording the history of Copan's dynasty. The text was commissioned by a later king, Kayak Yipiaj Chan Kayawil, to commemorate the city's history and to legitimize his own rule. Unfortunately, the stairway collapsed in ancient times, and the blocks were jumbled, making the text difficult to read. Scholars are still working to reconstruct the full text. Copan was also a center of astronomical observation. The city's rulers commissioned the construction of observatories and monuments aligned with celestial events. One structure, Temple 22, has doorways and windows aligned with the position of the sun at the solstices and equinoxes. The Maya were keen astronomers, tracking the movements of the sun, moon, planets, and stars. They calculated the length of the solar year with remarkable accuracy, 365.24 or 20 days, compared to the modern value of 365.24 22 days. They tracked the cycles of Venus, the morning and evening star, which they associated with war and sacrifice. Venus was personified as a war god, and its appearances in the sky were considered auspicious times for launching military campaigns. The Maya also observed lunar cycles, eclipses, and the movements of other planets. They recorded their observations in astronomical texts, some of which survive in the Dresden Codex, one of the few Maya books to escape Spanish destruction. Chichen Itza, in the northern Yucatan, represents a different phase of Maya civilization. While cities like Tikal and Palank flourished during the Classic period, Chichen Itza reached its peak during the terminal Classic and post-Classic periods. From around 800 to 1200 CE, Chichen Itza's architecture shows influences from central Mexico, leading some scholars to believe that the city was influenced or even controlled by foreign groups, possibly the Toltecs or other peoples from the highlands of central Mexico. The architecture at Chichen Itza is distinct from the classic Maya style. El Castillo, also known as the Temple of Kukulkan, the Maya name for the feathered serpent god, is a step pyramid with 4 staircases, each with 91 steps. Including the platform at the top, the total number of steps is 365, corresponding to the days of the solar year. During the spring and autumn equinoxes, The play of light and shadow on the pyramid's northern staircase creates the illusion of a serpent descending from the top, a spectacular demonstration of Maya astronomical knowledge and architectural skill. The Great Ball Court at Chichen Itza is the largest in Mesoamerica, over 500 feet long. The walls are carved with scenes of the ball game and its aftermath, including depictions of decapitated players, their blood spurting from their necks in the form of serpents and plants, symbolizing fertility and sacrifice. The sacred cenote, a large natural sinkhole, was a site of pilgrimage and sacrifice. Offerings were thrown into the cenote: jade, gold, pottery, incense, and human beings. Dredging of the cenote in the early 20th century recovered thousands of artifacts and the bones of numerous individuals, many of them children, sacrificed to the rain god Chak. Chichen Itza was a cosmopolitan city, a trading hub connecting the Maya world with central Mexico and beyond. Its prosperity was based on trade, salt production, and control of valuable resources. But like other Maya cities, Chichen Itza eventually declined, and by 1300 CE, the city was largely abandoned. Calakmul, located in the dense forests of southern Campeche, Mexico, was one of the most powerful Maya cities during the Classic period. Often referred to as the Snake Kingdom because of the snake head emblem glyph associated with the city, Calakmul was the great rival of Tikal. For centuries, these two superpowers vied for dominance, forming alliances with smaller cities, waging wars, and seeking to expand their influence. Calakmul's central precinct contains over 6,000 structures, making it one of the largest Maya sites by area. The main pyramid, Structura II, is one of the largest in the Maya world, rising over 160 feet and containing several earlier versions of the pyramid within, a common Maya practice of building new structures over old ones. Calakmul's power was based on its strategic location, control of trade routes, and its ability to forge alliances. The city formed a network of allied states, and its kings used marriage alliances, diplomacy, and military force to extend their influence. In the 7th century, Calakmul achieved several significant victories over Tikal, capturing and sacrificing Tikal's kings. But Tikal eventually struck back, and in 695 CE, Tikal defeated Calakmul in a decisive battle, capturing its king, Yichak Keok, known as Fiery Claw. This defeat marked the beginning of Calakmul's decline, though the city continued to be inhabited for some time. Life in these great Maya cities was complex and vibrant. The central precincts were the domain of the elite, the king, nobles, priests, and their retainers. But surrounding the monumental core were residential areas where commoners lived. Commoner houses were built on low platforms, with wooden frames and thatched roofs. Inside, there might be a single room or several, with sleeping areas, storage, and a hearth for cooking. Families were extended, with multiple generations living together. Daily life revolved around farming, craft production, and household tasks. Men worked in the fields, hunted, and engaged in trade. Women ground maize, cooked, wove textiles, and cared for children. Children helped with chores and learned the skills they would need as adults. Markets were important social and economic institutions. People gathered to buy and sell goods: maize, beans, squash, chili peppers, cacao, salt, pottery, textiles, tools. Barter was the primary method of exchange, though cacao beans, jade beads, and shell beads served as a form of currency for higher value transactions. Markets were also places to meet friends, hear news, and participate in the life of the city. Religion permeated every aspect of Maya life. The Maya universe was multi-layered: the heavens above, the earthly realm, and the underworld below. The gods inhabited all these realms, and they were both benevolent and dangerous. Rituals were necessary to maintain the balance of the cosmos, to ensure the rising of the sun, the coming of the rains, and the fertility of the earth. Priests performed elaborate ceremonies, often involving fasting, bloodletting, incense burning, chanting, and dancing. These rituals took place in temples, on top of pyramids, visible to the entire city. On special occasions, such as the accession of a new king, the dedication of a building, or the end of a calendar cycle, grand ceremonies were held, involving processions, feasting, music, and sacrifice. Human sacrifice, though shocking to modern sensibilities, was an integral part of Maya religion. The Maya believed that the gods had sacrificed themselves to create the world and humanity, and that humans owed a debt of blood in return. Sacrifice was seen as necessary to feed the gods, to sustain the universe, and to ensure the continuation of life. Victims were usually captives taken in war, but in times of crisis, such as severe drought, children or nobles might be sacrificed. The methods of sacrifice varied: decapitation, heart extraction, shooting with arrows, or, in the case of the sacred cenote at Chichen Itza, being thrown into the water. Sacrifice was ritualized, surrounded by ceremony, and the victim was often treated as a representation of a god, dressed in the god's regalia. To the Maya, death in sacrifice was not an end but a transformation, a journey to the afterlife and a role in the cosmic drama. We have journeyed into the heart of the Maya world, exploring the dense jungles and limestone plains that shaped this civilization. We have traced the origins of the Maya from simple farming villages to the great cities of the pre-classic period. We have witnessed the rise of the classic Maya, the era of powerful kings, monumental pyramids, and flourishing culture. We have walked through the cities of Tikal, Palenque, Copan, Chichen Itza, and Calakmul, marveling at their architecture and learning their histories. But there is so much more to discover. In the next part of our journey, we will delve into the daily lives of the Maya people. We will explore their writing and calendar systems, their mathematics and astronomy. We will meet the gods and goddesses they worshipped and understand the myths that explained their world. We will see their art, their crafts, and their innovations. And we will begin to understand the forces that would eventually lead to the decline of the classic Maya civilization. But for now, rest. Let the images settle: the jungle-clad pyramids rising above the trees, the carved stelae recording the deeds of kings, the sacred cenote reflecting the sky. Breathe deeply and drift towards sleep. We will continue soon. Of all the achievements of Maya civilization, perhaps none is more remarkable than their writing system. The Maya developed one of only a handful of fully independent writing systems in human history. Their glyphs, carved in stone, painted on pottery, and written in books, allow us to hear the voices of the ancient Maya, to know their history, their beliefs, and their stories. Let us explore this sophisticated script and learn how it was deciphered. Maya writing is a logosyllabic system, meaning it combines two types of signs: logograms and syllabic symbols. Logograms are signs that represent entire words or concepts. For example, a glyph showing a jaguar's head represents the word Balam, meaning jaguar. Syllabic signs represent individual sounds, consonant-vowel combinations. The Maya had syllabic signs for ba, bi, bai, bo, bu, and so on, allowing them to write any word in their language. A single word could be written entirely with logograms, entirely with syllabic signs, or with a combination of both. This flexibility gave Maya scribes artistic freedom, allowing them to create visually pleasing compositions. The same word might be written several different ways, depending on the space available and the aesthetic preferences of the scribe. Maya glyphs are often arranged in double columns, read from left to right and top to bottom in pairs. So you read the top left glyph, then the top right glyph, then move down to the next pair. Each glyph block might contain one or several individual signs, combined into a single square or rectangular unit. The script is beautiful, with each glyph a small work of art. Some glyphs are abstract geometric shapes, while others are recognizable images: a jaguar's face, a skeletal death god, a corn plant, a hand. The Maya wrote on various surfaces. Stone monuments, stelae, and altars were carved with hieroglyphic texts recording the deeds of kings. These texts often include dates, names, titles, and descriptions of events: births, accessions, marriages, warfare, sacrifices, and deaths. Temples, palaces, and tombs were inscribed with texts commemorating their construction and dedication. The lintels above doorways, made of stone or wood, were carved with scenes and hieroglyphic captions. Pottery vessels were painted with elaborate scenes and often included hieroglyphic texts. Some texts name the owner of the vessel, others describe the contents: chocolate drink, tamales, etc. And still others tell stories or record mythological scenes. The Maya also wrote on bark paper, made from the inner bark of fig trees. The bark was beaten, soaked, and flattened into sheets, which were coated with lime plaster to create a smooth writing surface. These sheets were folded accordion style into books called codices. Maya scribes painted the codices with brushes, using black ink made from soot for text and colorful pigments for illustrations. The codices covered a range of topics: astronomy, divination, ritual, calendars, and mythology. Tragically, most Maya codices were destroyed by the Spanish during the colonial period. Spanish priests, viewing the books as works of the devil, burned them in great bonfires. Only 4 Maya codices are known to survive. The Dresden Codex, the most complete, contains astronomical tables, including predictions of solar and lunar eclipses and the cycles of Venus. The Madrid Codex focuses on rituals, horoscopes, and agricultural activities. The Paris Codex contains prophecies and rituals associated with calendar cycles. The Grolier Codex, whose authenticity was long debated but is now accepted, contains a Venus table. These 4 books are all that remain of what was once a vast library of Maya knowledge. The loss is incalculable, comparable to the burning of the Library of Alexandria. For centuries after the Spanish conquest, the Maya writing system was a mystery. Scholars could recognize that the glyphs were writing, but they could not read them. Some progress was made in the 19th century. A French scholar, Charles Etienne Brasseur de Bourbourg, discovered a manuscript written by Diego de Landa, a Spanish bishop who lived in Yucatan in the 16th century. De Landa's manuscript, Relación de las Cosas de Yucatán, contained descriptions of Maya culture, including a section on the calendar and what appeared to be a Maya alphabet, but de Landa had misunderstood the writing system. He thought it was alphabetic, with each glyph representing a letter. He asked his Maya informants to write the Spanish alphabet in Maya glyphs, but the informants, thinking he was asking for the sounds of the letters, gave him syllabic signs. For example, when de Landa said B pronounced B in Spanish, the Maya scribe drew the sign for B. This de Landa alphabet was actually a syllabary, not an alphabet, but it would later prove useful in decipherment. In the early 20th century, scholars made progress in understanding the Maya calendar and number system, which appeared frequently in inscriptions. But the bulk of the texts remained unreadable. The breakthrough came in the mid-20th century, through the work of several brilliant scholars. Yuri Norizov, a Soviet linguist, argued that Maya writing was not purely logographic, each sign representing a word, but logosyllabic, combining logograms and syllabic signs. He used de Landa's syllabary and statistical analysis to identify phonetic patterns in the glyphs. In 1952, Norizov published a paper demonstrating that he could read Maya glyphs phonetically. His work was initially dismissed by many Western scholars, partly due to Cold War politics, but it was a critical step forward. In the 1960s, Tatyana Proskoryakov, a Russian-American archaeologist and artist, made another crucial breakthrough. By carefully analyzing the dates and contexts of inscriptions at the site of Piedras Negras, she recognized patterns that indicated the texts were historical, recording the lives of specific rulers. She identified birth glyphs, accession glyphs, and death glyphs, and she could reconstruct the dynastic history of the city. This was revolutionary. Previously, many scholars had assumed that Maya inscriptions were purely about calendars, astronomy, and religion. Proskoryakov showed that they were also historical records, chronicling the lives and deeds of real people. In the 1970s and 80s, a new generation of scholars, including Linda Scheel, David Stewart, and others, built on this foundation. At a series of workshops held in Palenque, Mexico, these epigraphers worked collaboratively, sharing discoveries, testing hypotheses, and making rapid progress. They deciphered hundreds of glyphs, identifying phonetic values, reading names of gods and kings, and translating complex texts. David Stewart, who began studying Maya glyphs as a child and published his first decipherment at age 12, became one of the leading epigraphers. His work, along with that of his colleagues, has unlocked the vast majority of Maya texts. Today, we can read about 80% of Maya glyphs. Some glyphs remain undeciphered, and some texts are fragmentary or badly eroded, but the broad outlines of Maya history, politics, religion, and culture are now accessible. The decipherment of Maya writing has transformed our understanding of the Maya, We now know the names of dozens of Maya cities, not the modern names given by archaeologists, but the names the Maya themselves used. Tikal was called Mudal, Palenque was Lakamha, Copan was Oxwitik. We know the names of kings and queens, their titles, their genealogies, and their relationships with other cities. We can read accounts of battles, alliances, marriages, and rituals. We can understand the mythology and cosmology that shaped Maya worldview. The glyphs tell stories of gods and heroes, of creation and destruction, of the journey of the sun through the underworld and its rebirth each dawn. Maya scribes, the Atzib, were highly respected members of society. They were usually nobles or members of the royal family, trained from childhood in the art of writing. Scribble training was rigorous, involving the memorization of hundreds of glyphs, the practice of calligraphy, and the study of history, mythology, and ritual. Scribes often depicted themselves in art, shown with their brushes and paint pots, sometimes with ink stains on their faces, a mark of their profession. Some scribes signed their work, including their names and sometimes their titles or relationships to the king. Women could be scribes, though they were less common than men. Lady Kiabel of El Peru Waka, mentioned earlier, is depicted on pottery painting a codex, indicating her literacy and learning. The act of writing was sacred. The Maya believed that the gods had given them writing, and the patron deities of scribes included the maize god and the monkey scribes, twin gods who were skilled in writing and the arts. Writing was a form of magic, a way to capture and preserve knowledge, to speak across time and space, to make the invisible visible. The glyphs themselves were alive, imbued with the essence of what they represented. To write the glyph for jaguar was to invoke the power of the jaguar. To write the name of a god was to summon that god's presence. This belief gave writing immense power and made the scribe a powerful figure, a mediator between the human and divine worlds. The Maya were obsessed with time. They developed one of the most sophisticated calendar systems in human history, tracking cycles within cycles, measuring time with precision, and projecting dates thousands of years into the past and future. Let us explore the Maya calendar, understanding its structure, its purposes, and its profound influence on Maya culture. The Maya calendar is not a single calendar, but a set of interlocking cycles, each serving different purposes. The most fundamental cycle is the Tzolk'in, the 260-day sacred calendar. The Tzolk'in consists of 20-day names combined with 13 numbers. The 20-day names are Emix, Ec, Akbal, Kan, Chicken, Simi, Manik, Lamat, Muluk, Osi, Churan, Eb, Ben, Ecs, Men, Sib, Kaban, Etsnab, Kok, and Ahau. Each day name is associated with specific deities, animals, colors, and qualities. For example, Emix is associated with the earth crocodile, the number 1, and the east. Ahau is associated with the sun, lords, and completion. The 13 numbers cycle independently of the 20 names, so the first day of the Tzolk'in is 1 Emix, the second is 2 Ac, the third is 3 Akbal, and so on. After 13 Ben you reach 1 S, and the cycle continues. Because 20 and 13 have no common factors other than 1, it takes 260 days for the same combination, e.g. 1 Emix, to recur. The Tzolk'in was used for divination, for naming children, for determining auspicious days for planting, marriage, warfare, and rituals. Each day had its own character, favorable for some activities, unfavorable for others. Maya priests, called day keepers, consulted the Tzolk'in to advise individuals and communities on important decisions. The origin of the 260-day cycle is debated. Some scholars suggest it is based on the human gestation period, approximately 9 months or 260 days. Others note that it corresponds to the agricultural cycle in the Maya highlands, the time between planting and harvest. Still others point to astronomical cycles, such as the intervals between zenith passages of the sun at certain latitudes. Whatever its origin, the Tzolk'in was central to Maya life and religion. The second major calendar is the Hab, the 365-day solar calendar. The Hab consists of 18 months of 20 days each, plus a short period of 5 days called the Wayeb. The 18 months have names Pop, Wo, Zip, Zotz, Tisk, Zul, Yakskin, Mal, Chen, Yaks, Zak, Say, Mak, Kankin, Muan, Pax, Kaab, and Kumku. The Wayeb, the 5 extra days at the end of the year, was considered unlucky, a dangerous time when the boundaries between the worlds were thin and malevolent forces could intrude. People fasted, avoided dangerous activities, and performed rituals to ensure the safe passage of the year. The Hob was used for agricultural planning, for organizing the civic and religious year, and for tracking the seasons. However, the Hob does not account for the extra quarter day in the solar year, so it slowly drifts relative to the seasons. The Maya were aware of this discrepancy, but they did not add a leap day as we do. The Tzolk'in and Hob mesh together like two gears, one with 260 teeth and one with 365 teeth. Any given day is identified by both its Tzolk'in date and its Hob date. For example, a day might be 4 Ahau, 8 Kumku, because 260 and 365 share a common factor of 5. The same combination of Tzolk'in and Hob dates repeats every 18,980 days, or 52 Hob years. This 52-year cycle is called the calendar round. The completion of a calendar round was a significant event, a time of renewal and ceremony. People who lived to see the completion of a full calendar round, age 52, were considered blessed, having witnessed the full cycle of time. But the calendar round had a limitation. It could not distinguish dates more than 52 years apart. A date like 4 Ahau 8 Kameku would recur every 52 years, so if you wanted to record a date in history, you needed a longer cycle. This is where the long count comes in. The long count is a linear count of days from a mythological starting point. The Maya creation date. In the most commonly used correlation, the Goodman-Martinez-Thompson or GMT correlation, this date corresponds to August 11, 3114 BCE in our calendar. Why this date? According to Maya mythology, this was the date of the current creation, when the gods set the cosmos in order, raised the sky, and created humanity from maize. The long count records the number of days since this creation date using a base 20 decimal system. The units are 1 kin equals 1 day, 1 uanil equals 20 kin equals 20 days, 1 ton equals 18 uanil equals 360 days, approximately 1 year. 1 katon equals 2,000 ton equals 7,200 days, approximately 20 years. 1 baktan equals 20 katon equals 144,000 days, approximately 394 years. A long count date is written as a series of numbers, starting with baktans. For example, 9.12, 2 row. 16 means 9 baktans, 12 katons, 2 tons, 0 uanils, 16 kin. This can be converted to a specific date in our calendar. The long count allowed the Maya to record dates with precision and to place events in a historical sequence spanning centuries. Inscriptions often include long count dates combined with Tzolk'in and Hob dates, providing redundancy and allowing scholars to reconstruct exact dates. The long count operates in cycles of 13 baktans, after which the cycle resets to 0.0, 0.0 to 0. The completion of a 13 baktan cycle, approximately 5,125 years, was called the end of a great cycle. The previous great cycle began on the mythological creation date, 0.0, 0.0, 0 August 11, 314 BCE, and it ended on 13.0, 10.0, which corresponds to December 21, 2012, in our calendar. This date gained notoriety in popular culture, with some people predicting apocalyptic events. But the Maya themselves did not view it as the end of the world, merely the end of one cycle and the beginning of another, a time of renewal and transformation. In fact, some Maya inscriptions project dates far into the future, millions of years from now, showing that the Maya expected the world to continue. Beyond the long count, the Maya tracked even longer cycles. The 819-day cycle, for example, was associated with the 4 cardinal directions and may have had astronomical significance. The Maya also tracked the synodic cycles of Venus, Mars, and other planets, as well as lunar cycles and eclipses. The Dresden Codex contains tables predicting eclipses with remarkable accuracy, showing that the Maya understood the periodicity of these events. Why were the Maya so concerned with time and calendars? Several reasons. First, the calendar structured religious and civic life. Rituals, festivals, and ceremonies were tied to specific dates. The calendar told the Maya when to plant, when to harvest, when to perform rain ceremonies, when to honor the gods. Second, the calendar was a tool of power. Kings and priests who controlled the calendar controlled time itself. They could predict eclipses, which were seen as ominous signs, and they could perform rituals to save the sun or moon, demonstrating their power and their connection to the divine. Third, the calendar was a way of understanding history and destiny. The Maya believed in cyclical time, that events repeat in patterns. By studying the past, recorded in the long count, they could anticipate the future. Prophecies were associated with specific calendar periods, especially the ends of Katuns and Baktuns. Fourth, the calendar reflected the Maya worldview, their understanding of the cosmos as ordered, cyclical, and interconnected. Time was not an abstract concept but a living force, inhabited by deities who influenced events. Each day was a god, each month a divine being, each cycle a chapter in the cosmic drama. Today, some Maya communities continue to use the Tzolk'in, consulting day keepers for divination and guidance. The ancient calendar lives on, a testament to the enduring legacy of Maya knowledge. The Maya were not only masters of time, but also accomplished mathematicians and astronomers. Their mathematical system was sophisticated, and their astronomical observations were remarkably precise. Let us explore Maya mathematics and astronomy, understanding the knowledge that allowed them to track the stars and calculate complex calendar cycles. Maya mathematics was based on a vigesimal, or base 20, system unlike our decimal base 10 system. This is thought to derive from counting on fingers and toes, 20 in total. The Maya used only 3 symbols to write numbers, a dot representing 1, a bar representing 5, a shell symbol representing 0. Numbers from 1 to 19 were written by combining dots and bars. For example, 3 was 3 dots, 6 was 1 bar and 1. 13 was 2 bars and 3 dots, and 19 was 3 bars and 4 dots. The use of 0 was a revolutionary concept. The Maya independently invented 0, one of only a handful of cultures to do so. Others include the Babylonians, Indians, and Chinese. 0 was not just a placeholder but a number in its own right, essential for mathematical calculations and for the long count calendar. The shell symbol representing 0 might have been chosen because of its association with completeness and the void, the womb from which creation emerges. In the vigesimal system, numbers are arranged vertically, with the lowest unit at the bottom and higher units stacked above. The bottom position represents 1's 20-0, the next position represents 20's 21, the next represents 400's 22, and so on. However, in the long count calendar, the third position is modified to 360 instead of 400, to approximate the solar year. Maya scribes were capable of complex calculations, including multiplication, division, and even concepts analogous to fractions and proportions. They used mathematics for astronomy, for architecture, for commerce, and for keeping track of tribute and taxation. Maya astronomy was closely linked to their calendar and religious beliefs. The Maya observed the sky meticulously, tracking the movements of the sun, moon, planets, and stars. They did this without telescopes, using only the naked eye, but their observations were remarkably accurate. The Maya knew the length of the solar year to within minutes of the true value. They calculated the synodic period of Venus, the time it takes Venus to return to the same position relative to the Sun, as 584 days, very close to the modern value of 583.92 days. They tracked lunar cycles, predicting eclipses by recognizing the patterns of the Saros cycle, a period of approximately 18 years after which eclipses repeat. The Maya built observatories, structures aligned with celestial events. One example is the Caracol at Chichen Itza, a circular tower with narrow windows aligned with the positions of Venus at specific points in its cycle. Another is structure Eta 7 sub at Uaxactun, a pyramid with stairs on all 4 sides, aligned with the sunrise on the solstices and equinoxes, allowing the Maya to mark the changing seasons. The Maya recognized the ecliptic, the path the sun appears to follow across the sky, and they identified constellations along this path. The Maya zodiac was different from the Western zodiac, with 13 constellations instead of 12, reflecting the importance of the number 13 in the Tzolk'in. Maya constellations included animals and mythological beings, a turtle, a snake, a peccary, and others. The Milky Way was seen as the world tree, the axis of the cosmos, or as the road to the underworld, the path traveled by the sun god each night. Venus held special significance for the Maya. Known as Chak-Eg, the great star, Venus was associated with war and sacrifice. The first appearance of Venus as the morning star, after its period of invisibility, was considered an auspicious time for warfare. Kings would launch military campaigns timed with Venus's cycles, believing the planet's power would ensure victory. The Dresden Codex contains a Venus table, predicting the planet's appearances and disappearances over many years. This table allowed Maya priests to anticipate these events and to plan rituals and campaigns accordingly. The Maya also observed Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury, and possibly other celestial objects. They may have observed supernova, the sudden appearance of bright new stars in the sky, and comets, seen as omens of change or disaster. The Maya understanding of astronomy was not abstract science, but was deeply integrated with religion and mythology. The movements of celestial bodies were the actions of gods, and understanding these movements allowed the Maya to align their lives with the divine order. Eclipses, for example, were seen as the sun or moon being devoured by a celestial serpent or jaguar. Rituals were performed during eclipses to aid the sun or moon in its battle, to ensure its survival and return. The ability to predict eclipses gave priests and kings immense authority, demonstrating their knowledge and their connection to the gods. The Maya also had a sophisticated understanding of architecture and engineering. They built cities in challenging environments, dense jungles, steep mountains, arid plains, and they created structures that have endured for over 1,000 years. Maya architects used corbel arches, a technique where stones are laid in overlapping courses until they meet at the top, creating a vaulted ceiling. This technique has limitations. Corbel arches cannot span large distances, but the Maya used it effectively to create long, narrow rooms and vaulted passageways. They engineered reservoirs, dams, and aqueducts to manage water, essential in regions without rivers or in cities with large populations. At Tikal, for example, archaeologists have identified extensive systems of reservoirs and channels that collected and stored rainwater. They built raised causeways, called sakbiab singulars or sakbi, connecting different parts of cities or linking cities to each other. These white stone roads, elevated above the jungle floor, allowed for easier travel and transport. Some sakbiab stretched for dozens of miles, impressive feats of engineering. The Maya also created elaborate drainage systems, stucco-lined channels that prevented flooding during the rainy season. They understood principles of geometry and proportion, evident in the symmetry and alignment of their buildings. Many structures were aligned with cardinal directions, with astronomical events, or with sacred mountains. The interplay of light and shadow on buildings, such as the serpent effect at El Castillo in Chichen Itza, demonstrates the Maya's understanding of geometry and their ability to integrate art, architecture, and astronomy. Maya knowledge was preserved and transmitted through oral tradition, through the teaching of scribes and priests, and through codices. But much was lost with the Spanish conquest, when books were burned, temples destroyed, and the old ways suppressed. Yet, the inscriptions that remain carved in stone, painted on pottery, have allowed us to recover much of this knowledge. We can now appreciate the Maya as accomplished scientists and mathematicians, who observed the heavens, calculated complex cycles, and built a civilization of remarkable sophistication. We have explored the intellectual achievements of the Maya, their writing system that allowed them to record history and speak across time. We have deciphered their calendar, understanding how they measured and marked the cycles of days, years, and millennia. We have marveled at their mathematics and astronomy, their ability to track the stars, and predict celestial events with precision. But there is more to the Maya than intellect and science. In the next part of our journey, we will explore the spiritual world of the Maya, their gods and myths, their rituals and beliefs. We will see their art, the masterpieces they created in stone, stucco, jade, and paint. We will understand their society, the lives of kings and commoners, nobles and slaves. And we will witness the forces that brought about the decline of the classic Maya, the mysterious collapse that left their great cities abandoned to the jungle. But for now, rest. Let the glyphs dance before your eyes, intricate and beautiful, carrying the voices of the ancients. Let the stars turn overhead, tracking the same paths the Maya observed centuries ago. Breathe deeply, and drift towards sleep. We will continue soon. Religion permeated every aspect of Maya life. The Maya universe was alive with gods and spirits, forces that shaped the world and determined the fate of humanity. Let us explore Maya religion, understanding the gods they worshipped, the myths that explained their world, and the rituals they performed to maintain the cosmic order. The Maya cosmos was structured in 3 levels: the heavens above, the earthly realm, and the underworld below. The heavens consisted of 13 layers, each inhabited by different deities. The highest layer was the domain of the supreme creator gods, while lower layers were associated with celestial bodies, weather, and other divine forces. The underworld, called Xibalba, meaning place of fear, consisted of 9 levels, a dark, watery realm ruled by death gods and filled with dangers. Xibalba was not simply a place of the dead but a dynamic, frightening world where the sun journeyed each night, battling the lords of death, to be reborn each dawn. The earthly realm, the surface of the world, was the meeting place of the upper and lower worlds, a thin layer where humanity lived, suspended between the divine and the demonic. The world tree, often depicted as a ceiba tree, connected all 3 levels. Its roots reached into Xibalba, its trunk stood in the earthly realm, and its branches stretched into the heavens. The world tree was the axis mundi, the center of the universe, and many Maya temples and pyramids were symbolic representations of this sacred tree, mountains linking earth and sky. The Maya pantheon was vast, with hundreds of gods and goddesses, each associated with specific forces, places, and activities. Some gods were benevolent, others were malevolent, and many were ambiguous, capable of both helping and harming humanity. One of the most important gods was Itzamna, the supreme creator deity, associated with the sky, wisdom, and writing. Itzamna was often depicted as an old man with a Roman nose, sometimes with the features of a bird or reptile. He was the patron of priests and scribes, the giver of maize, and the inventor of writing and the calendar. Ixchel, the goddess of the moon, was associated with childbirth, weaving, medicine, and divination. She was depicted as an old woman with a serpent headdress, or as a young woman sitting in the crescent moon. She was both a healer and a destroyer, capable of sending floods and causing disease. Ka-Inishaja, the sun god, was one of the most important deities, associated with kingship, power, and life. Each day, the sun god journeyed across the sky, and each night, he descended into Xibalba, transforming into the jaguar god of the underworld, battling the lords of death. His nightly struggle and his rebirth each dawn represented the eternal cycle of life, death, and renewal. Chak, the rain god, was crucial to agricultural societies dependent on rainfall. Chak was depicted with a long, curling nose, fangs, and teardrop-shaped eyes, often shown wielding a lightning axe. There were actually 4 Chaks, one for each cardinal direction, each associated with a different color: red for east, white for north, black for west, and yellow for south. Rituals to Chak were common, especially during droughts, and included offerings, prayers, and sometimes human sacrifice, often of children, whose tears were thought to encourage rain. The maize god, known as Hun Hunapu in the Popolva, the K-Ich Maya creation epic, was central to Maya religion. Maize was the substance from which humanity was created, and the maize god represented fertility, beauty, youth, and life. He was often depicted as a handsome young man with an elongated head shaped like an ear of corn, sometimes emerging from the earth or from a turtle's shell, symbolizing rebirth. The hero twins, Hunopu and X-Balink, were legendary figures who appear in the Popolva. The twins were ballplayers who descended into Xibalba, where they faced a series of trials and challenges set by the lords of death. Through their cleverness, courage, and skill, they defeated the death gods, avenging their father, the maize god, who had been killed and buried in Xibalba. The hero twins then ascended to the heavens, where they became the sun and the moon or Venus, in some versions. Their story represents the triumph of life over death, light over darkness, and it was reenacted in ritual ball games. The vision serpent was a supernatural being that served as a conduit between the human and divine worlds. During bloodletting rituals, the vision serpent would emerge from the smoke of burning blood-soaked paper, and from its mouth would emerge gods or ancestors, allowing communication between realms. The Bacabs were 4 gods who held up the sky at the 4 corners of the world, each associated with a cardinal direction and a color. They ensured the stability of the cosmos, preventing the sky from collapsing. The death gods, rulers of Xibalba, were frightening figures, often depicted as skeletal or decaying, adorned with bells, death eyes, and symbols of putrefaction. The most prominent was God A, also known as Sisin or Kisin, the Lord of Death. Despite their fearsome nature, the death gods were not purely evil. They were necessary parts of the cosmic order, governing the transition from life to death and the journey of souls. Maya mythology explained the creation of the world and humanity. According to the Popol Vuh, the gods first attempted to create beings who would worship them. They tried making humans from mud, but these creatures dissolved in water and could not speak properly. They tried making humans from wood, but these beings had no minds or hearts, and they did not honor the gods, so they were destroyed in a great flood. Finally, the gods made humans from maize dough, mixing it with the blood of the gods. These maize humans were intelligent, creative, and capable of worshipping the gods properly. This myth explains the centrality of maize in Maya culture and the belief that humans owe a debt of blood to the gods who created them. Maya rituals were elaborate and multifaceted, designed to honor the gods, ensure cosmic balance, and seek divine favor. Bloodletting was the most sacred and personal form of sacrifice. Kings, queens, and nobles would pierce their tongues, earlobes, or genitals with sharp instruments, stingray spines, obsidian blades, or bone awls. The blood was collected on bark paper, which was then burned, the smoke rising as an offering to the gods. This act was both painful and perilous, and it induced altered states of consciousness, during which the ritualist might receive visions or communicate with ancestors and deities. Bloodletting was depicted frequently in Maya art, with rulers shown in the act, often accompanied by the vision serpent. Human sacrifice, though shocking, was an essential part of Maya religion. The Maya believed that the gods had sacrificed themselves to create the world, and humanity owed a reciprocal debt. Blood was the most precious substance, the essence of life, and it was necessary to feed the gods and sustain the universe. Victims of sacrifice were usually captives taken in war, especially high-ranking nobles or enemy kings. The capture and sacrifice of an enemy ruler was the ultimate demonstration of power and a profound humiliation for the defeated city. The sacrifice itself was ritualized. The victim was often dressed as a god, treated with respect or at least ceremonial deference, and the act of sacrifice was accompanied by music, chanting, and the participation of the community. Methods of sacrifice included decapitation, heart extraction, shooting with arrows, and immolation. In some cases, victims were thrown into cenotes, such as the sacred cenote at Chichen Itza, as offerings to Chak, the rain god. In addition to human sacrifice, the Maya offered food, flowers, incense. Copal resin was commonly burned, jade, obsidian, pottery, and other valuable objects to the gods. These offerings were placed in temples, buried in caches beneath buildings, thrown into cenotes, or burned. Festivals and ceremonies marked the Maya calendar year. The new year, the Wayab, and the ends of calendar cycles were times of ritual, fasting, and renewal. The dedication of temples, the accession of kings, and military victories were celebrated with grand ceremonies involving processions, feasting, music, dancing, and sacrifices. The ball game, as mentioned, was both a sport and a ritual, reenacting the cosmic struggle between the hero twins and the lords of Xibalba. Games could last hours, and they were dangerous, with serious injuries or death possible. The outcome of the game had ritual significance, and in some cases, the losers or possibly the winners were sacrificed. Divination was practiced to understand the will of the gods and to predict the future. Priests consulted the Tzolk'in calendar, interpreting the significance of specific days. They also used other methods, reading patterns in thrown objects, beans, maize kernels, crystals, interpreting dreams, and observing natural phenomena, the flight of birds, the behavior of animals, weather patterns. Divination guided decisions about warfare, agriculture, health, and personal matters. The Maya also practiced shamanic rituals, entering trance states through fasting, bloodletting, and the use of psychoactive substances. Plants like tobacco, morning glory seeds which contain LSA, similar to LSD, psilocybin mushrooms, and possibly hallucinogenic toads were used in rituals. These substances allowed priests and shamans to journey to the spirit world, to communicate with gods and ancestors, and to gain knowledge and power. Ancestor worship was central to Maya religion. The dead were not gone but continued to exist in Xibalba, or in other realms, and they could influence the living. Ancestors were honored with offerings, prayers, and rituals, and their bones were sometimes kept in family shrines or buried beneath house floors, keeping them close. Important ancestors, especially deceased kings, were deified, becoming intermediaries between the living and the gods. The Maya concept of the soul was complex. They believed that individuals had multiple souls or spiritual essences. One soul, associated with breath and life force, departed at death. Another soul, associated with the individual's identity and consciousness, journeyed to the afterlife. The fate of the soul depended on the manner of death. Those who died in childbirth, in battle, or as sacrifices went to a paradise, often associated with the heavens or the sun. Others journeyed to Xibalba, facing trials and challenges. The ultimate goal for many was to become one with the divine, to merge with the cosmic forces, or to be reborn. Maya religion was not static but evolved over time, with regional variations and changes in emphasis. The arrival of foreign influences, such as from Teotihuacan or later from central Mexico, introduced new gods and practices. The Spanish conquest brought Christianity, which was sometimes blended with traditional Maya beliefs, creating a syncretic religion that persists in some Maya communities today. Understanding Maya religion is essential to understanding Maya civilization. Religion motivated the construction of temples, the creation of art, the structure of society, and the actions of kings. It provided meaning, order, and hope in a world that was often harsh and unpredictable. The Maya were master artists, creating works of extraordinary beauty and sophistication. Maya art was not art for art's sake, but was deeply intertwined with religion, politics, and identity. Let us explore Maya art, understanding its forms, its meanings, and its enduring legacy. Maya sculpture is perhaps the most famous form of Maya art. The Maya carved in stone, wood, and stucco, creating monuments, architectural decorations, and portable objects. Stelae, tall stone slabs carved with images and hieroglyphic texts, were erected in plazas to commemorate kings and important events. The stelae of Copan are masterpieces of three-dimensional carving, with figures that seem to emerge from the stone. The depth of the carving, the intricate details of costume and regalia, and the lifelike portrayal of the human figure demonstrate the skill of Copan's sculptors. At Pailank, sculptors excelled in low relief, creating delicate carvings on stone panels and stucco friezes. The oval palace tablet, for example, shows Lady Sakyok handing the crown to her son, Kiinish Janob Pakal, legitimizing his accession to the throne. The figures are rendered with grace and elegance, their clothing and jewelry meticulously detailed. Lintels, the beams above doorways, were carved with scenes of ritual, warfare, and royal life. At Yaxchilan, wooden lintels depict Lady Kaabal Zuk, the wife of King Shield Jaguar, performing bloodletting rituals, with the vision serpent emerging from a bowl of blood-soaked paper. These lintels, carved from sapodilla wood, have survived for over 1,000 years, testament to the durability of the material and the care taken by the Maya. Stucco, a plaster made from lime, was used to create elaborate architectural decorations. Facades of temples and palaces were covered with stucco reliefs depicting gods, mythological scenes, and cosmic symbols. Many of these stucco decorations have eroded over the centuries, but at sites like Pailank and Ekbalam, enough remains to give a sense of their original splendor. At Ekbalam, the Acropolis has stucco friezes showing winged figures, perhaps representing ancestors or supernatural beings, rendered with astonishing detail. Jade carving was another important art form. Jade, a green stone ranging from pale to deep emerald, was the most precious material in the Maya world, valued above gold. Jade was associated with water, fertility, life, and the breath of life. The Maya word for jade, yaks, also means green, blue, and precious. Maya artists carved jade into jewelry, beads, pendants, ear flares, pectorals, and into ritual objects like masks and figurines. The jade mask of Pakal, found in his tomb, is one of the most famous Maya artifacts. Made from over 200 pieces of jade, it covered the king's face in death, transforming him into a divine being. The Maya also carved in obsidian, a volcanic glass that can be sharper than modern surgical steel. Obsidian was used for tools and weapons, but also for ritual objects and mirrors. Obsidian mirrors were polished to a reflective sheen and used for divination and ritual, perhaps to see into other worlds, or to communicate with spirits. Maya pottery is another art form that reveals much about their culture. Maya potters created vessels in a variety of shapes: cylindrical vases, plates, bowls, tripod vessels, effigy pots shaped like animals or gods, and incense burners. Pottery was made by hand, using the coil method, and fired in open fires or simple kilns. Some pottery was left plain or simply decorated with incised designs. But the finest Maya pottery was painted with elaborate scenes in multiple colors. The so-called codex-style pottery from the late Classic period features scenes painted in black and orange-red on a cream-colored slip, resembling the pages of a codex. These vessels depict gods, mythological episodes, courtly scenes, and ritual activities, accompanied by hieroglyphic texts. Some scenes show the hero twins in the underworld, ball players in action, or the maize god being reborn. Other vessels were polychrome, painted in reds, oranges, blacks, browns, and creams, with intricate designs and detailed figures. Pottery was used in daily life, but fine painted vessels were made for the elite, used in feasts, given as gifts, or placed in tombs. Many fine vessels were made specifically for the tomb, intended to accompany the deceased into the afterlife. Hieroglyphic texts on pottery often include a formula known as the primary standard sequence, which names the type of vessel, its contents, its owner, and sometimes the artist who made it. This provides valuable information about patronage, trade, and the social context of art. Maya murals, though fragile and often poorly preserved, offer a vivid glimpse into Maya life. The murals of Bonampak in Chiapas, Mexico, are the most famous. Discovered in 1946, the Bonampak murals cover the walls of 3 rooms in a small temple, depicting a series of events: a royal heir designation, a battle, the torture and sacrifice of captives, and a celebratory dance. The murals are painted in vivid colors: reds, blues, yellows, greens, and they show dozens of figures, each individually rendered, engaged in dynamic action. The level of detail is extraordinary: the patterns on textiles, the expressions on faces, the instruments played by musicians, the wounds on captives. The Bonampak murals reveal the violence and pageantry of classic Maya life, showing both the glory and the brutality of war and kingship. Another important mural site is Calakmul, where murals depict scenes of market trade, daily life, and ritual. At San Bartolo, in Guatemala, pre-classic murals dating to around 100 BCE show early versions of the maize god and creation myths, providing insight into the development of Maya iconography. Textiles were an important art form, though few examples survive due to the humid climate. We know from depictions in sculpture and pottery that the Maya wore elaborate garments, woven with complex patterns and dyed in bright colors. Nobles and kings wore cotton garments decorated with embroidery, feathers, and jade beads. Women were the primary weavers, and weaving was a sacred activity associated with the goddess Isis Chel. Featherwork was another valued art. The feathers of tropical birds, quetzals, macaws, parrots, were woven into headdresses, cloaks, and shields. Quetzal feathers, iridescent green and highly prized, were reserved for royalty. The long tail feathers of the male quetzal were especially valued, and the birds were captured, plucked, and released, allowing them to grow new feathers. Body adornment was an art form in itself. The Maya practiced cranial deformation, binding infants' heads with boards to create an elongated shape, which was considered beautiful. They filed their teeth into points or inlaid them with jade or obsidian discs. They tattooed and scarified their skin, creating patterns that indicated status, achievements, or identity. They wore elaborate jewelry: jade, shell, bone, and stone beads, ear flares that stretched the earlobes, nose ornaments, labrets, lip plugs, and pectorals. Elite individuals wore so much jewelry that they must have been heavily burdened, but this was a display of wealth and power. Maya art served multiple functions. It glorified kings and reinforced their power, depicting them as semi-divine figures, victorious in war, pious in ritual. It recorded history, preserving the names and deeds of rulers for posterity. It communicated with the gods, serving as offerings, as sacred objects, or as conduits for divine power. It encoded knowledge, with iconography and hieroglyphs conveying complex ideas about cosmology, mythology, and ritual. And it was beautiful, created with skill and care, reflecting the Maya aesthetic sense. Maya art was not static but evolved over time. Early pre-classic art was relatively simple, but by the late pre-classic, a recognizable Maya style had emerged. The classic period saw the full flowering of Maya art, with regional styles developing in different areas. The art of the Piton region, including Tikal and Calakmul, emphasized monumentality and bold forms. The art of the Uzumacinta region, including Yaxchilan and Piedras Negras, excelled in narrative and dynamic compositions. The art of Palenque was characterized by elegance and delicate detail. The terminal classic and post-classic periods saw changes, with some areas showing influences from central Mexico. Today, Maya art is admired and studied around the world. Major museums hold collections of Maya sculpture, pottery, and jade. But many pieces were looted from sites, removed without archaeological context, and sold on the black market. This has deprived scholars of valuable information and has damaged the heritage of the Maya people. Efforts are underway to return looted artifacts to their countries of origin and to protect sites from further looting. Maya art continues to inspire contemporary artists, both Maya and non-Maya, who draw on traditional motifs, techniques, and themes. Maya society was hierarchical, with clear distinctions between classes, but it was also dynamic, with opportunities for mobility and complex relationships between individuals and groups. Let us explore the structure of Maya society, the roles of different classes, and the lives of the people who made up this civilization. At the apex of society was the Ku-Hul Ajah, the divine lord, the king. The king was not just a political leader but a sacred figure, the intermediary between the human and divine worlds. His person was imbued with divine power, and his actions affected the well-being of the entire realm. The king's legitimacy depended on several factors. Lineage was crucial. Kings were expected to descend from a royal bloodline, often tracing their ancestry back to mythological founders or gods. Dynasties could last for centuries, with succession usually passing from father to son, though other patterns occurred. The king's ability to perform rituals was essential. He was the chief priest, responsible for bloodletting, offerings, and ceremonies that ensured the favor of the gods. His piety and his connection to the divine were demonstrated through these acts. Military success was another source of legitimacy. A king was expected to lead armies, to capture enemies, and to protect his realm. Victories were celebrated, and captives were displayed and sacrificed to demonstrate the king's power. The king was also a patron of the arts and learning. He commissioned monuments, buildings, and artworks that glorified his reign and preserved his memory. He supported scribes, artists, and scholars, who in turn enhanced his prestige. The king lived in a palace at the center of the city, surrounded by courtyards, gardens, and administrative buildings. The palace was the seat of government, the residence of the royal family, and the site of courtly ceremonies. The king had multiple wives, though one was designated as the principal queen. Royal marriages were often political alliances, linking powerful families or cementing relationships between cities. Queens could wield significant power, especially as mothers of heirs, and some ruled in their own right. Below the king were the nobles, the aristocratic class. Nobles held titles such as Ajah Lord, Sahal Regional Governor or Subordinate Lord, and other ranks indicating their position in the hierarchy. They controlled land, collected tribute, commanded military forces, and served in administrative roles. Nobles lived in stone houses near the city center, often in palace complexes adjacent to the king's residence. Their homes were multi-room structures with plastered walls, sometimes decorated with murals, and furnished with luxury goods. Nobles participated in courtly life, attending ceremonies, feasts, and rituals. They wore fine clothing, elaborate jewelry, and feathered headdresses, visually distinguishing themselves from commoners. Education was important for nobles. Sons were trained in warfare, statecraft, and ritual, while daughters learned household management, weaving, and the arts expected of elite women. Some nobles were scribes, trained in the complex art of hieroglyphic writing. Warfare was a key activity for nobles. They served as military commanders, leading troops in battle, and they participated in combat personally. Capturing high-ranking enemies was a path to glory and advancement, and nobles displayed their captives in ceremonies before sacrificing them. Priests formed another important group within the elite. The Maya priesthood was specialized, with different priests responsible for different deities, rituals, and areas of knowledge. Some priests were astronomers, tracking celestial events and maintaining the calendar. Others were diviners, interpreting omens and advising individuals and the king. Still others conducted rituals, performing sacrifices, bloodletting, and ceremonies. Priests underwent rigorous training, learning the sacred texts, the movements of the stars, the meanings of glyphs, and the proper performance of rituals. They often lived in or near temples, dedicating their lives to the service of the gods. Priests were respected and feared, possessing knowledge and power that ordinary people did not have. Artisans and craftsmen occupied an intermediate position in Maya society. Skilled workers, sculptors, potters, weavers, jewelers, featherworkers were valued for their abilities. They produced the goods that sustained the economy and adorned the elite. Some artisans worked for the royal court, creating objects for the king and nobles. Others worked independently or in workshops, producing goods for trade and for the market. Artisans might have some social mobility, especially if they were highly skilled or if they created objects that brought prestige to their patrons. Merchants were another important group. Long-distance trade connected Maya cities with distant regions, bringing obsidian from the highlands, jade from the Motagua Valley, salt from coastal areas, cacao, feathers, textiles, and other goods. Merchants traveled long distances, facing dangers from bandits, wild animals, and difficult terrain. They were often accompanied by armed guards and porters who carried goods on their backs, as the Maya did not have wheeled vehicles or large pack animals. Merchants could accumulate wealth and gain status, though they were still below the nobility in the social hierarchy. Some merchants may have served as spies or emissaries, gathering intelligence and facilitating diplomatic relations. The vast majority of Maya people were commoners, farmers who lived in rural villages or on the outskirts of cities. Commoners grew the food that sustained society: maize, beans, squash, chili peppers, and other crops. They practiced milpa agriculture, clearing and burning forest plots, planting crops for a few years, then moving to new plots while the old ones regenerated. Commoners lived in simple houses, similar to those of their ancestors thousands of years earlier: wooden posts, thatched roofs, walls of wattle and daub. Inside, there was little furniture: sleeping mats, storage baskets, pottery for cooking and eating, tools for farming and household tasks. Life was structured around the agricultural cycle. Men cleared fields, planted, weeded, and harvested. Women prepared food, grinding maize on stone metates to make dough for tortillas and tamales. They wove textiles on backstrap looms, tended gardens, raised turkeys and dogs, and cared for children. Children helped with chores from a young age, learning the skills they would need as adults. Commoners owed tribute to the king and nobles, providing labor for construction projects, agricultural produce, and goods. They could be called upon to serve in the army during times of war. Despite their lower status, commoners were not without agency. They had their own rituals, their own community leaders, and their own social networks. They participated in religious festivals, visited local shrines, and consulted priests and shamans for divination and healing. At the bottom of the social hierarchy were slaves. Slavery among the Maya was not race-based, but was typically the result of capture in war, debt, or crime. Captives who were not sacrificed might be enslaved, performing menial labor or serving in elite households. People who could not pay debts might sell themselves or their children into slavery. Criminals, depending on the offense, could be enslaved as punishment. Slaves had few rights and could be bought and sold, but slavery was not necessarily permanent. Slaves could be freed by their owners, could buy their freedom, or could be released after a certain period of service. Some slaves were treated relatively well, especially if they served in households rather than in hard labor. Maya society was not rigidly fixed. There was some mobility, especially for individuals with exceptional skills, ambition, or luck. A skilled scribe, a successful warrior, or a favored artisan might rise in status. Conversely, nobles could fall from favor, lose their wealth, or be captured and enslaved. Gender roles were defined but not absolute. Men dominated public and political life, warfare, and most priestly roles. Women's primary roles were domestic, managing the household, raising children, and producing textiles. But women were not powerless. Elite women could own property, participate in rituals, and wield political influence, especially as mothers, wives, or sisters of kings. Some women ruled as queens, either as regents for young sons or in their own right. Women participated in religious rituals, including bloodletting. Women's labor, especially weaving, was essential to the economy, and textiles were valuable trade goods and tribute items. Maya society, like the society of most ancient civilizations, was marked by inequality, with vast differences in wealth, power, and privilege between the elite and commoners. But it was also a society bound together by shared beliefs, by participation in rituals and festivals, and by the interconnections of trade, tribute, and kinship. Understanding Maya society helps us see the Maya not as a monolithic entity, but as a complex, dynamic civilization composed of individuals with diverse roles, interests, and experiences. We have explored the spiritual world of the Maya, their gods and myths, their rituals and sacrifices. We have admired their art, the beauty they created in stone, jade, pottery, and paint. We have understood their society, the roles of kings and priests, nobles and commoners, and the hierarchies that structured their world. But now, we must confront a mystery. At the height of their power and achievement, the classic Maya civilization collapsed. Great cities were abandoned, dynasties ended, and the jungle reclaimed the temples and palaces. In the final part of our journey, we will explore the classic Maya collapse, seeking to understand what happened and why. We will see the post-classic period, when new cities rose and old traditions were transformed. We will witness the arrival of the Spanish and the conquest that ended Maya independence. And we will reflect on the legacy of the Maya, their contributions to world civilization, and the enduring presence of Maya people today. But for now, rest. Let the images of gods and temples, of art and society, settle in your mind. Breathe deeply, and drift towards sleep. The final chapter awaits, but for now, there is only rest. Around 800 CE, the classic Maya civilization began to unravel. Over the course of a century, the great cities of the southern lowlands were abandoned. Kings stopped erecting monuments. Construction ceased. Populations declined dramatically, with some estimates suggesting a reduction of over 90% in some regions. By 900 CE, cities like Tikal, Palenque, Copan, and Calakmul, which had flourished for centuries, were largely deserted. The jungle reclaimed the temples and palaces, vines and roots cracking the stone, trees growing from rooftops. This catastrophic decline is known as the classic Maya collapse. It is one of the great mysteries of archaeology, and scholars have debated its causes for decades. No single explanation is sufficient. The collapse was likely the result of multiple, interconnected factors. Let us explore the leading theories. Environmental degradation is a major factor. The Maya had been modifying their environment for over 1,000 years, clearing forests, draining swamps, building cities. By the late Classic period, population densities in some areas were extraordinarily high, approaching the limits of what the land could support. Deforestation was extensive. Trees were cut for building materials, for fuel to make lime plaster, which requires burning limestone at high temperatures, and to clear land for agriculture. Deforestation leads to soil erosion, reduced rainfall, and the disruption of local ecosystems. Studies of lake sediments show increased erosion and sedimentation during the late Classic period, indicating widespread deforestation and soil loss. The thin tropical soils of the Maya lowlands, once stripped of forest cover, quickly lost fertility. Intensive agriculture, especially in regions with high population densities, depleted soil nutrients. Without modern fertilizers or crop rotation techniques, yields declined, and it became harder to feed the population. Drought is another critical factor. Climate studies, using data from lake sediments, cave formations, stalagmites and stalactites, and tree rings, indicate that the Maya region experienced a series of severe droughts during the late Classic period, especially between 800 and 900 CE. Some droughts lasted for years, even decades. For a civilization dependent on rain-fed agriculture, droughts would have been catastrophic. Crop failures would lead to famine, malnutrition, and disease. Food shortages would undermine the authority of kings, who were expected to ensure prosperity and to intercede with the gods for rain. Warfare intensified during the late Classic period. Inscriptions record frequent conflicts, with cities attacking each other, capturing kings, and destroying monuments. The rivalry between Tikal and Calakmul, for example, drew in numerous smaller cities, creating a web of alliances and enmities. Warfare diverted resources from agriculture and construction to military endeavors. It destroyed infrastructure, disrupted trade, and created instability. Captured populations were enslaved or sacrificed, reducing labor forces. In a time of environmental stress and resource scarcity, intensified warfare would have exacerbated problems, creating a downward spiral. Political fragmentation and the breakdown of centralized authority likely played a role. The power of kings depended on their ability to provide for their people, to win wars, and to perform rituals that ensured divine favor. When droughts and famines occurred, when wars were lost, the legitimacy of kings was undermined. Commoners may have lost faith in their rulers, leading to unrest, rebellion, or simply the decision to leave, to migrate to regions with better conditions. As cities weakened, the networks of trade and alliance that bound the Maya world together frayed. Smaller cities may have broken away from the control of larger centers, fragmenting the political landscape. Overpopulation relative to the carrying capacity of the land is another factor. By the late Classic period, some Maya cities had populations in the tens of thousands, supported by intensive agriculture. But the tropical environment, with its thin soils and dependence on rainfall, could not support such densities indefinitely, especially in the face of environmental degradation and drought. Trade disruptions may have contributed. The Maya economy depended on long-distance trade, bringing essential resources like obsidian, salt, and jade. If trade networks were disrupted by warfare or the collapse of trading partners, cities would lose access to these goods, undermining their economies. Disease is a possible factor, though evidence is limited. Malnutrition, caused by food shortages, would have weakened immune systems, making populations vulnerable to epidemics. Waterborne diseases, exacerbated by drought and the concentration of populations around dwindling water sources, could have spread rapidly. Invasion or migration is sometimes suggested, but there is little evidence of a large-scale invasion. Some scholars have proposed that groups from central Mexico or other regions moved into the Maya lowlands, but this does not explain the widespread, simultaneous collapse of numerous cities. The collapse was not uniform. Some cities, especially in the northern lowlands of the Yucatan Peninsula, continued to thrive or even grew during the terminal Classic period. Chichen Itza, for example, became a major power in the 9th and 10th centuries as the southern cities declined. This suggests that regional factors, such as access to cenotes for water or connections to trade networks, influenced which cities survived and which collapsed. The collapse also did not mean the end of the Maya people. Populations declined dramatically in the southern lowlands, but they did not disappear. Some people remained in or near the old cities, living in small villages, maintaining a connection to the ancestral sites. Others migrated to other regions, including the northern Yucatan, the highlands of Guatemala, and coastal areas. Maya culture, language, and traditions continued, even as the political structures and monumental architecture of the Classic period faded. The classic Maya collapse is a sobering reminder of the vulnerability of civilizations. It demonstrates that environmental mismanagement, climate change, warfare, and social instability can interact in destructive ways, bringing down even the most sophisticated societies. It also challenges us to consider the sustainability of our own civilizations, the importance of environmental stewardship, and the need for adaptive, resilient social systems. The post-classic period, from around 900 to 1500 CE, was a time of transformation for the Maya. While the great cities of the southern lowlands lay abandoned, new centers of power emerged, especially in the northern Yucatan Peninsula and the highlands of Guatemala. Let us explore the post-classic Maya, understanding the changes and continuities in this new era. Chichen Itza, in the northern Yucatan, became the dominant power in the early post-classic period, roughly from 900 to 1200 CE. The city's architecture shows a blend of Maya and Central Mexican styles, leading to debates about the identity and origins of its rulers. Some scholars suggest that Chichen Itza was influenced or controlled by the Toltecs, a powerful group from central Mexico. Others argue that the similarities in art and architecture reflect trade, diffusion of ideas, or shared Mesoamerican traditions, rather than direct conquest. Regardless of the origins, Chichen Itza was a cosmopolitan city, a center of trade and pilgrimage. The sacred cenote, as mentioned, drew pilgrims from across the Maya world, who made offerings to the rain god. The city controlled the salt trade from the northern coasts, a valuable resource. Chichen Itza's influence extended across the Yucatan and beyond, and the city became wealthy and powerful. But Chichen Itza eventually declined, and by the 13th century, it was largely abandoned, its power waning for reasons that are still unclear. After Chichen Itza's decline, Mayapan became the dominant city in the Yucatan. Mayapan, located south of Chichen Itza, rose to power in the 13th century and controlled much of the peninsula for over 200 years. Mayapan was a walled city, densely populated, with an estimated population of 15 to 20,000 at its peak. Unlike the sprawling, dispersed cities of the classic period, Mayapan was compact, with the elite living within the walls and commoners in surrounding areas. Mayapan's rulers, the Kokam dynasty, maintained control through a combination of military force, political alliances, and possibly by holding hostage members of subordinate noble families who were required to live in Mayapan. This system ensured loyalty, or at least compliance, from outlying regions. Mayapan's architecture was less grandiose than that of the classic cities. Buildings were smaller, construction techniques were less refined, and there was less emphasis on monumental sculpture and hieroglyphic inscriptions. This has led some scholars to view the post-classic as a period of decline, a dark age after the brilliance of the classic period. But this view is overly simplistic. The post-classic Maya adapted to new circumstances, developing new forms of political organization, new trade networks, and new cultural expressions. Mayapan itself was a bustling, vibrant city, with workshops producing pottery, tools, and other goods, and with active trade connections to coastal ports and distant regions. But Mayapan too eventually fell. In the mid-15th century, around 1440 or 1450, the city was destroyed in a civil war. Rival noble families, resentful of Kokam rule, rebelled, and the city was sacked and burned. The Kokam dynasty was overthrown, and Mayapan was abandoned. After the fall of Mayapan, the Yucatan fragmented into a patchwork of competing chiefdoms and small city-states. These polities were often at war with each other, and political instability characterized the late post-classic period. In the highlands of Guatemala, the post-classic saw the rise of the Kayich, the Kakshikal, and other highland Maya groups. These groups built fortified cities in defensible locations, reflecting the militaristic nature of the period. The Kayich capital, Cuyumarcaj, also called Utatlan, was a powerful city, controlling a territory that included much of the western highlands. The Kech were skilled warriors and administrators, and they subjugated neighboring groups, extracting tribute. But the highland kingdoms were also rivals, and warfare between the Kech, the Kakshikal, and others was common. These conflicts weakened the highland Maya, making them vulnerable when the Spanish arrived. The post-classic period also saw changes in religion and culture. There was an increased emphasis on militarism, with warrior deities like Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, and Tlaloc, a rain and war god from central Mexico, gaining prominence. Human sacrifice, already practiced during the classic period, may have become more frequent and more public. The sacred cenote at Chichen Itza, for example, received offerings throughout the post-classic, including human victims. Trade became increasingly important, with coastal trading networks connecting the Yucatan with central Mexico, the Caribbean, and Central America. Maya merchants traveling by large dugout canoes transported goods like salt, honey, cacao, textiles, obsidian, and jade. The coastal city of Chulam, perched on cliffs overlooking the Caribbean, was a thriving port in the post-classic period, with connections to trade routes stretching across the sea. The post-classic Maya continued to use the calendar, though the long count was used less frequently, with more emphasis on the short count, a Caton-based system. Hieroglyphic writing persisted, though it became less common, especially in the Yucatan. In the highlands, writing was less developed, and much knowledge was transmitted orally or through pictorial manuscripts. Despite the changes, the post-classic Maya maintained continuity with the past. They still spoke Maya languages, worshipped Maya gods, and identified with the ancient cities, even if those cities were abandoned. They saw themselves as the descendants of the great kings of the classic period, and they drew on ancient traditions to legitimize their own rule. The post-classic period was not a decline but a transformation, an adaptation to new circumstances. The Maya survived the collapse of the classic civilization, and they continued to build, to trade, to fight, and to create. But the post-classic world was about to face a challenge unlike any before the arrival of the Spanish. In 1492, Christopher Columbus reached the Caribbean, initiating the European colonization of the Americas. Within a few decades, Spanish conquistadors had toppled the Aztec Empire in Mexico and the Inca Empire in Peru. The Maya, divided into numerous independent polities, would also face Spanish invasion, but the conquest of the Maya world would prove more difficult and prolonged. Let us explore the Spanish conquest of the Maya, understanding the events, the resistance, and the profound changes that followed. The Spanish first encountered the Maya in 1517, when Francisco Hernández de Córdoba led an expedition to the Yucatan Peninsula. The Spanish were impressed by the stone cities, the elaborate temples, and the wealth they saw, but they were also met with fierce resistance. In several battles, Maya warriors attacked the Spanish, inflicting casualties and forcing them to retreat. Córdoba himself was wounded and died shortly after returning to Cuba. In 1518, Juan de Grijalva led another expedition, which explored the Yucatan coast and made contact with Maya groups. The Spanish traded with the Maya, obtaining gold and information, but they did not attempt a conquest at this time. In 1519, Hernán Cortés launched his famous expedition to Mexico, which resulted in the conquest of the Aztec Empire by 1521. With the Aztecs defeated, the Spanish turned their attention to the Maya. In 1524, Pedro de Alvarado, one of Cortés's lieutenants, led a campaign into the highlands of Guatemala, targeting the K'ich and other highland Maya groups. Alvarado was a brutal and ruthless commander. He attacked Maya cities, burning towns, killing or enslaving inhabitants, and forcing the survivors to submit. The K'ich king, Tikkun Uman, led his warriors against the Spanish, but they were defeated in battle. According to legend, Alvarado himself killed Tikkun Uman in single combat, though the historical accuracy of this account is debated. The K'ich capital, Cuyumarcaj, was captured and destroyed, and the K'ich kingdom was subjugated. Other highland Maya groups, weakened by previous conflicts with the K'ich, allied with the Spanish or submitted, hoping to avoid the fate of those who resisted. But resistance continued in some areas. The Kakshikal initially allied with the Spanish, but they later rebelled, withdrawing to fortified positions in the mountains. It took the Spanish several years to fully subdue the highlands, and even then, pockets of resistance remained for decades. The conquest of the Yucatan Peninsula proved even more difficult. The Maya of the Yucatan were divided into numerous independent chiefdoms, each with its own leaders and agendas. There was no central authority to defeat, no single conquest that would bring the entire region under Spanish control. The Spanish, led by Francisco de Montijo and later his son, Francisco de Montijo the Younger, launched several campaigns into the Yucatan beginning in 1527. But the Maya resisted fiercely, using guerrilla tactics, ambushes, and their knowledge of the terrain. The Spanish faced not only military resistance, but also the challenges of the environment: heat, humidity, disease, lack of food and water, and the difficulty of moving armies through dense jungle. The Maya also employed psychological warfare. They abandoned their cities as the Spanish approached, leaving the invaders to find deserted settlements with no supplies and no one to fight. They launched surprise attacks, then melted back into the jungle. It took the Spanish nearly 20 years to establish a permanent foothold in the Yucatan. In 1542, the Spanish founded the city of Mérida on the site of a Maya settlement called Tijo. From Mérida, they gradually extended their control, establishing towns, converting the Maya to Christianity, and imposing Spanish rule. But even after the establishment of Spanish colonial government, the Maya continued to resist. In 1546, a major rebellion broke out in the eastern Yucatan. Maya groups attacked Spanish settlements, killed colonists and priests, and besieged Spanish towns. The rebellion was eventually suppressed, but it demonstrated the depth of Maya resistance. In the southern lowlands, the region of the Piton in Guatemala, the Maya kingdom of Itza remained independent until 1697. The Itza, centered on the island city of Najpetan, also called Tayazal in Lake Piton Itza, had resisted Spanish incursions for over a century and a half. The Spanish made several attempts to conquer the Itza, sending missionaries, soldiers, and expeditions, but the Itza defended their territory. In 1697, the Spanish finally launched a major assault. They built a road through the jungle, transported boats overland, and attacked Najpetan by land and water. The city fell, and the last independent Maya kingdom was conquered. The Spanish conquest brought catastrophic changes to the Maya world. The most devastating impact was demographic. European diseases, smallpox, measles, typhus, influenza swept through the Maya population, which had no immunity. These epidemics killed millions, reducing the Maya population by an estimated 90% within a century. Entire communities were wiped out, social structures collapsed, and knowledge was lost. The Spanish imposed a colonial system that exploited Maya labor. The encomienda system granted Spanish colonists control over Maya communities, requiring them to provide labor and tribute. Maya people were forced to work in fields, mines, and workshops, often under harsh conditions. The Spanish also sought to convert the Maya to Christianity. Missionaries, especially Franciscan and Dominican friars, established churches and missions, teaching the Maya the Catholic faith. Conversion was often coerced, with those who resisted facing punishment. The Spanish viewed Maya religion as paganism, the work of the devil. They destroyed temples, idols, and religious texts. The burning of Maya codices by Bishop Diego de Landa in 1562, mentioned earlier, was part of this campaign to eradicate Maya beliefs. Ironically, de Landa also wrote a detailed account of Maya culture, preserving some knowledge even as he sought to destroy it. Despite Spanish efforts, many Maya people maintained their traditional beliefs, often blending them with Christianity in a syncretic religion. They continued to honor their ancestors, to perform rituals tied to the agricultural cycle, and to consult day keepers. Maya languages survived, and many communities retained their cultural identity. The colonial period was a time of oppression, exploitation, and suffering for the Maya. But it was also a time of adaptation and resilience. The Maya found ways to survive, to preserve their culture, and to resist, sometimes openly, more often subtly. Rebellions occurred periodically. The Caste War of Yucatan, which began in 1847, was a massive uprising in which the Maya nearly succeeded in driving the Spanish-descended population out of the peninsula. The rebellion lasted decades, and some Maya communities remained independent until the early 20th century. Today, the Maya continue to face challenges: poverty, discrimination, marginalization. But they also continue to thrive. maintaining their languages, their traditions, and their identity. There are over 7 million Maya people living in Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. They are farmers, teachers, artists, activists, and leaders, contributing to their societies while preserving their heritage. The Maya civilization has left an indelible mark on human history. Their achievements in writing, mathematics, astronomy, art, and architecture are remarkable, and their influence extends far beyond the borders of the Maya world. Let us reflect on the legacy of the Maya, understanding their contributions and their enduring significance. The Maya developed one of the few fully independent writing systems in human history. Their hieroglyphic script, with its combination of logograms and syllabic signs, was sophisticated and flexible, capable of recording complex ideas, narratives, and historical events. The decipherment of Maya writing in the 20th century has opened a window into the Maya mind, allowing us to read their history, their myths, and their thoughts in their own words. This achievement places the Maya alongside the inventors of cuneiform, hieroglyphics, Chinese characters, and the alphabet as one of the great literacy traditions of humanity. The Maya calendar system was one of the most accurate in the ancient world. Their calculations of the solar year, the lunar month, and the cycles of Venus were remarkably precise. The long count calendar, with its linear recording of time from a mythological creation date, allowed the Maya to place events in a historical sequence spanning millennia. The Maya concern with time, with cycles and patterns, reflects a deep philosophical and scientific engagement with the nature of existence. Maya mathematics, including the independent invention of zero and the use of a vigesimal system, was advanced. Zero, a concept that seems obvious today, was a revolutionary idea, essential for mathematics, astronomy, and record-keeping. Only a handful of cultures independently invented zero, and the Maya were among them. Maya astronomy was sophisticated, with careful observations of celestial bodies and the ability to predict eclipses, the cycles of Venus, and other phenomena. The Maya built observatories, aligned buildings with astronomical events, and recorded their observations in codices and inscriptions. Their knowledge of astronomy was intertwined with their religion and cosmology, reflecting the Maya view of the universe as ordered, predictable, and divine. Maya art is admired for its beauty, complexity, and expressiveness. Maya sculptors, painters, and craftsmen created works that rank among the finest in world art. The depth of carving on Copan stelae, the elegance of Palanque reliefs, the vibrant murals of Bonampak, the exquisite jade jewelry all demonstrate the skill and creativity of Maya artists. Maya art was not merely decorative, but served religious, political, and educational purposes, conveying complex ideas and reinforcing social structures. Maya architecture, with its towering pyramids, elaborate palaces, and sophisticated urban planning, impresses even today. The Maya built cities in challenging environments, overcoming obstacles of terrain, climate, and resources. Their use of corbel arches, their construction of reservoirs and aqueducts, and their alignment of buildings with astronomical events demonstrate engineering skill and architectural sophistication. The ruins of Tikal, Palanque, Chichen Itza, and other sites draw millions of visitors each year, inspiring awe and wonder. The Maya contributed to the Mesoamerican cultural tradition, which influenced other societies in Mexico, Central America, and beyond. The ball game, the ritual calendar, the use of cacao, the pantheon of gods, these and other elements were shared across Mesoamerica, creating a common cultural framework. The Maya were part of this broader world, but they also developed distinctive traditions that set them apart. The Maya legacy is not only in the past but also in the present. Maya people continue to live, to speak Maya languages, to practice traditions that connect them to their ancestors. The K'ich, the Yucatec, the Mam, the Kaqchikel, and many other Maya groups maintain their cultural identity, even as they engage with the modern world. Maya languages spoken by millions are vibrant, evolving, and still used in daily life, in literature and in education. Maya textiles, woven on backstrap looms, continue ancient patterns and techniques, and they are prized for their beauty and craftsmanship. Maya religious practices, blended with Christianity, persist in rituals, festivals, and pilgrimages. The cult of the Maya day keeper, the Ajcuij, continues in highland Guatemala, where day keepers consult the Tzolk'in calendar, burn incense, and perform rituals for individuals and communities. The Maya are not a people frozen in the past, museum relics to be studied and admired. They are living communities, adapting to change, facing challenges, and contributing to the societies in which they live. The Maya have also inspired people around the world. The mystery of the jungle cities, the beauty of the art, the complexity of the writing and calendar all have captured the imagination of scholars, travelers, and the public. Maya civilization has been the subject of countless books, documentaries, films, and exhibitions. Unfortunately, this fascination has sometimes led to romanticization, misrepresentation, or exploitation. The Maya have been portrayed as wise, mystical sages, as bloodthirsty savages, as victims, as exotic others. These stereotypes do a disservice to the complexity and diversity of Maya culture. It is important to approach the Maya with respect, to recognize them as real people with histories, achievements, and agency, not as symbols or projections of our own desires. The Maya have also faced challenges related to their heritage. Archaeological sites have been looted, with artifacts stolen and sold on the black market. This looting destroys archaeological context, depriving scholars of information, and it robs the Maya of their heritage. Efforts are underway to protect sites, to repatriate looted artifacts, and to involve Maya communities in the stewardship of their ancestral heritage. Tourism to Maya sites brings economic benefits, but it also poses challenges: the impact of visitors on fragile ruins, the displacement of local communities, and the commodification of culture. Sustainable tourism, developed in consultation with Maya communities, can provide benefits while respecting the integrity of the sites and the people. The Maya have also contributed to broader conversations about sustainability, resilience, and the relationship between humans and the environment. The classic Maya collapse, as discussed, was likely caused by a combination of environmental degradation, climate change, warfare, and social factors. The Maya experience serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder that even sophisticated civilizations can falter if they do not manage their resources wisely and adapt to changing conditions. At the same time, the survival of the Maya people, their adaptation to colonial rule, their maintenance of cultural traditions, and their resilience in the face of adversity, are inspiring. The Maya have endured conquest, disease, oppression, and marginalization, yet they persist, and their culture continues to thrive. As we come to the end of our journey through Maya civilization, let us reflect on what we have learned and what the Maya can teach us. First, the Maya remind us of the power of human creativity and ingenuity. Without metal tools, without the wheel, without large draft animals, the Maya built cities, developed a writing system, created sophisticated art, and made scientific discoveries. They demonstrate that human beings, given time, curiosity, and the drive to understand and shape their world, are capable of extraordinary achievements. Second, the Maya teach us about the importance of knowledge and learning. Maya scribes preserve their history, their myths, and their knowledge in glyphs. Maya astronomers track the stars, creating calendars and predicting celestial events. Maya mathematicians developed complex systems of calculation. Knowledge was valued, and those who possessed it, scribes, priests, astronomers, were respected and influential. In our own time, when misinformation is rampant and expertise is sometimes dismissed, the Maya example reminds us of the value of learning, of evidence-based knowledge, and of the specialists who dedicate their lives to understanding the world. Third, the Maya illustrate the interconnectedness of religion, culture, and society. For the Maya, the world was alive with meaning. Every action, every date, every natural phenomenon had significance. Religion was not separate from life, but was woven into every aspect of existence: agriculture, politics, art, warfare. This holistic worldview, in which the spiritual and the material are interconnected, offers an alternative to the fragmentation and secularization that characterize much of modern life. While we may not share the Maya's specific beliefs, we can appreciate the coherence and depth of their worldview. Fourth, the Maya show us the importance of environment and sustainability. The Maya depended on the land, the forests, and the water. When they degraded their environment, When droughts occurred, their civilization suffered. The classic Maya collapse, whatever its precise causes, demonstrates that civilizations ignore environmental limits at their peril. In our own time, facing climate change, deforestation, pollution, and resource depletion, the Maya experience is a stark warning. We must manage our relationship with the environment wisely, or we risk collapse. Fifth, the Maya teach us about resilience and adaptation. The Maya survived the collapse of the classic civilization. They survived the Spanish conquest, the diseases, the exploitation. They adapted, blended traditions, found ways to maintain their identity while engaging with new realities. Today, Maya communities continue to face challenges, but they also continue to innovate, to organize, to advocate for their rights, and to preserve their culture. Their resilience is a testament to the strength of culture and community. Sixth, the Maya challenge us to think about the nature of civilization and progress. The classic Maya civilization, with its cities, its monuments, its art and science, is often seen as a pinnacle of achievement. But it also involved warfare, human sacrifice, social inequality, and environmental degradation. The post-classic Maya, often viewed as a period of decline, was actually a time of adaptation and survival. What does it mean for a civilization to succeed or fail? Is it the size of cities, the grandeur of monuments, the complexity of institutions? Or is it the well-being of the people, the sustainability of the society, the transmission of culture across generations? The Maya challenge us to think critically about how we define success and to consider multiple perspectives. Seventh, the Maya remind us of the importance of cultural diversity and the value of different ways of knowing. The Maya worldview, their calendar, their myths, their art, these are different from those of other civilizations, and they enrich the tapestry of human culture. In a globalized world, where cultural homogenization is a real threat, the persistence of Maya culture, of Maya languages and traditions, is valuable not only to the Maya themselves, but to all of humanity. Diversity of thought, of expression, of belief, makes the world richer and more resilient. Finally, the Maya remind us of the fragility and impermanence of civilizations. The great cities of Tikal, Palenque, and Copan, which once bustled with life, now lie in ruins, swallowed by the jungle. The dynasties of kings, who claimed divine authority and erected monuments to their glory, are now names on stones, their kingdom's dust. This impermanence is a humbling lesson. No matter how powerful, how wealthy, how sophisticated a civilization, it can fall. Time erodes stone, and history moves on. But the Maya also remind us that even in ruins, there is beauty. The temples, though crumbling, still inspire awe. The glyphs, though silent for centuries, now speak again. The art, though worn by time, still moves us, and the people, though changed, still endure. Civilizations rise and fall, but culture, knowledge, and the human spirit persist. And so, our journey through Maya civilization comes to an end. We have walked through the jungles and plains of Central America, exploring a land of extraordinary beauty and diversity. We have traced the origins of the Maya, from simple farming villages to the magnificent cities of the classic period. We have marveled at their achievements in writing, calendar, mathematics, and astronomy. We have seen their art, the masterpieces they created in stone, jade, pottery, and paint. We have understood their religion, their gods and myths, their rituals and sacrifices. We have witnessed the classic Maya collapse, the mysterious decline that left their great cities abandoned. We have followed the Maya through the post-classic period, seeing how they adapted and survived. We have confronted the tragedy of the Spanish conquest and the resilience of the Maya people. And we have reflected on the legacy of the Maya, their contributions to human civilization, and the lessons they offer. The Maya are not a lost civilization, a vanished people known only through ruins. They are living communities, millions strong, speaking Maya languages, practicing traditions and shaping the future. They carry the legacy of their ancestors, the knowledge and culture passed down through generations. They face challenges, poverty, discrimination, environmental threats, but they also possess strengths, community, culture, resilience. As we close this chapter, we honor the Maya, past and present. We honor the builders of the pyramids and the weavers of textiles. We honor the scribes who carved the glyphs and the astronomers who tracked the stars. We honor the kings and the commoners, the priests and the farmers, the artists and the warriors. We honor the Maya who survived conquest and the Maya who continue to thrive today. And we recognize that the story of the Maya is not over. It continues in the highland villages of Guatemala, in the towns of the Yucatan, in the cities of Central America and beyond. It continues in the languages spoken, the rituals performed, the textiles woven, the stories told. The Maya are part of our shared human story, and their civilization is a testament to the creativity, the complexity, and the resilience of humanity. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May the wisdom of the Maya guide you, and may the mysteries of the jungle inspire your dreams. Good night, and may your sleep be filled with visions of ancient temples rising above the trees, of glyphs carved in stone, of gods and heroes, of the eternal dance of time. From Histo-Hispa, thank you for exploring the Maya civilization with us. This has been the 8th in our series of ancient civilizations, following Mesopotamia, Greece, medieval Europe, the Vikings, ancient China, ancient Rome, and ancient Egypt. Each civilization has offered unique insights, achievements, and lessons. Mesopotamia gave us writing and law. Greece gave us democracy, philosophy, and drama. Medieval Europe gave us universities and cathedrals. The Vikings gave us exploration and sagas. China gave us paper, printing, gunpowder, and the compass. Rome gave us engineering, governance, and legal systems. Egypt gave us pyramids, mummies, and a fascination with the afterlife. And the Maya have given us a sophisticated writing system, a remarkable calendar, architectural wonders, and a resilient culture that endures. Together, these civilizations represent the richness and diversity of human history. They remind us that humanity has always been creative, curious, and capable of greatness. They also remind us that civilizations face challenges, that they change and adapt, and that they leave legacies that shape the world. As you rest tonight, know that history is not just the past. It lives in us, in the languages we speak, the ideas we hold, the technologies we use, the values we cherish. We are the inheritors of thousands of years of human endeavor, and we are the creators of the future. May the stories of the ancients guide us, inspire us, and remind us of what is possible. Sleep peacefully and dream of ancient wonders. And when you wake, may you carry with you a deeper appreciation for the journey of humanity, and a renewed commitment to adding your own thread to the tapestry of civilization. From all of us at Histo-Hispa, good night. And thank you for being part of this timeless journey.